Hey everyone, welcome back to the Checkered Sky channel where we dive into true crime stories. Today, we're diving into 5 real-life true crime cases, each grabbing the attention of the public and media. While investigating these 5 cases, detectives faced challenges. However, evidence, witness statements, and in some cases, surveillance footage ultimately helped uncover the truth. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Checkered Sky channel where we dive into true crime stories. Today we're diving into a case that shook a small Maryland town to its core. A case filled with mystery, heartbreak, and a relentless pursuit of answers. This is the story of Rengel Morin, a 37-year-old mother of 5 whose routine evening took a chilling turn. If you're into true crime, missing persons cases, and unraveling the threads of a real-life detective story, hit that subscribe button, tap the bell, and let's get started. It was August 5, 2023, in Bel Air, Maryland, a quaint community about 30 miles northeast of Baltimore. The sun was dipping low, casting a warm golden glow over the Ma and Pa Heritage Trail, a popular spot for joggers, walkers, and families looking to enjoy the summer air. Rengel Morin, a vibrant woman known for her love of fitness, laced up her running shoes and headed out for her usual jog on the trail. Rengel left her home around 6 p.m., her phone and Apple Watch in tow, likely listening to music or tracking her steps as she jogged along the familiar path. The Ma and Pa Trail, named after the old Maryland and Pennsylvania Railroad, stretched through Bel Air's wooded areas, offering a scenic escape for locals. To her family, this was just another evening. Rengel often hit the trail in the summer, and no one thought twice about her quick run. Her boyfriend, Richard Tobin, and her 5 children, ranging in age from young kids to a 19-year-old daughter, were used to her routine. But as the evening wore on, something felt off. By 8 p.m., Rengel hadn't returned. Richard, who'd been expecting her back within an hour, started to worry. He sent her a text, then another, but his phone stayed silent. No reply, no read receipt. Rengel was reliable, always checking in, especially with her kids depending on her. Her oldest daughter, who shared a close bond with her mom, tried calling, but the calls went straight to voicemail. The family's concern grew as the minutes ticked by. Richard drove to the trailhead near William Street, where Rengel usually parked her car. Sure enough, her car was still there, sitting quietly in the lot, untouched. Something was wrong. Richard didn't hesitate. He called the Harford County Sheriff's Office and reported Rengel missing. Her kids, especially her oldest, were distraught, clinging to hope that she'd just lost track of time or her phone had died. The police responded quickly, arriving at the trailhead to meet Richard and begin piecing together what might have happened. The sheriff's deputies fanned out along the Ma and Pa Trail, flashlights cutting through the dusk as they searched for any sign of Rengel. They questioned nearby residents and trail users, asking if anyone had seen a 37-year-old woman jogging that evening. A few locals mentioned seeing someone matching Rengel's description, but no one had noticed anything suspicious. The police combed the area near her car, looking for clues: a dropped phone, a forgotten water bottle, anything that might point to where she'd gone. As the night deepened, the search intensified, with deputies calling in additional support from local and state agencies. The family huddled together, trying to stay calm, but the question hung heavy: where was Rengel? Word of Rengel's disappearance spread quickly through Bel Air. The Harford County Sheriff's Office set up a command post near the trail, coordinating efforts as volunteers and officers scoured the woods. What had started as a routine jog was turning into a puzzle that would grip the nation. Rengel grew up in Harford County, Maryland, in a close-knit family that cherished their time together. Her mother, Patty Morin, described her as a bright spark, someone who could light up a room with her laughter and boundless energy. A fitness enthusiast, Rachel was no stranger to hard work. She ran marathons, lifted weights, and made regular visits to her local gym. Rachel's children were her world. She balanced her role as a mom with running her own cleaning business, a venture that showcased her entrepreneurial drive and commitment to providing for her family. To her boyfriend, Richard Tobin, Rachel was a partner who brought joy and stability to their shared life. Their relationship, though relatively new, was built on mutual respect and shared moments of happiness. As the search for Rachel Morin stretched into the early hours of August 6, 2023, the sheriff's office had already interviewed those closest to her, including Richard and her children, trying to build a timeline of her last moments. They asked about her routines, her relationships, and whether anyone might have had a reason to disrupt her life. The answers painted a clear picture. Rachel was a woman loved by many, with no known conflicts or enemies. Before going for a run, Rachel visited 2 local stores. This was confirmed by surveillance camera footage. There was nothing unusual about her behavior. As the search intensified, a grim discovery would soon shift the case from a missing persons report to something far more devastating. Rachel had parked her car near the William Street entrance, a spot she often chose for its easy access. By morning, the sheriff's office had expanded the search radius, focusing on the trail's less traveled sections. Deputies used ATVs to navigate the rugged terrain, while volunteers walked the path, eyes scanning for any sign of Rachel, her phone, her water bottle, or the bright workout gear she often wore. The effort was meticulous, with teams checking every bend, every thicket, hoping to find her alive. Around 1 p.m., 2 volunteers, Evan Knapp and Cecilia Ocorso, were searching near a creek line off the trail, not far from the William Street entrance. They noticed something unusual, a patch of flattened leaves resembling a deer trail, leading away from the main path. As they followed it, their hearts sank. They spotted rocks with traces of blood, scattered along a 150-foot stretch leading toward a drainage culvert, a concrete tunnel running under the trail. Evan, hesitant at first, moved closer, peering into the culvert's shadowed mouth. What he saw stopped him cold. A human figure, motionless. Time seemed to freeze as he processed the sight. Sheriff's deputies secured the area, cordoning off the culvert and the blood-marked path. The body was identified as Rachel Morin, her Apple Watch and phone still nearby, offering clues to her final moments. The scene was somber as investigators worked carefully, collecting evidence while respecting the gravity of the moment. Rachel's family was notified, and the weight of the news crushed them. Patty Morin, her mother, later recalled the detectives' compassion, even as they delivered the heartbreaking confirmation. The trail, once a place of solace for Rachel, had become the site of an unthinkable tragedy. Investigators turned to the medical examiner for answers. The autopsy, conducted by the Maryland office of the chief medical examiner, determined Rachel's death was a homicide, caused by a combination of strangulation and blunt force trauma. The report noted multiple injuries to her head, indicating a violent encounter, but the exact sequence of events remained unclear. Her Apple Watch provided critical data. At 7:07 p.m. on August 5th, her heart rate spiked to 115 beats per minute, suggesting a moment of intense stress or struggle. Within 2 minutes, it dropped to 69 beats per minute, and by 7:09 p.m., it was down to 62, marking the likely time of her death. This narrow window, 4 to 6 minutes, suggested a swift and deliberate act, leaving investigators to ponder whether it was planned or opportunistic. The sheriff's office collected forensic evidence from the scene, including DNA samples found on Rachel's body and belongings. These were sent to the Maryland State Police Crime Lab for analysis, a step that would later prove pivotal. Deputies photographed the area, documenting the blood-stained rocks and the path where Rachel had been dragged into the culvert. The scene suggested she'd been pulled off the trail, away from the open path where joggers and walkers passed by. The discovery raised chilling questions. Had someone been watching her? Was this a random act, or had Rachel crossed paths with someone who knew her routine? The community reeled as news of Rachel's death spread. Social media posts, once filled with hope for her safe return, now carried condolences and calls for justice. The sheriff's office urged anyone who'd been on the trail between 5 p.m. and 11 p.m. on August 5th to come forward. The trail's safety, once taken for granted, was now in question. Sheriff Jeffrey Galler increased patrols, and plans were made to install cameras along the path, a response to the community's growing fear.
It's been 4 days since Rachel Morin went missing, and 3 days since her body was located, the victim of a violent homicide. As your sheriff, I wanted to update all of you on where the investigation stands and what we are doing to keep our citizens safe.
Rachel's family, devastated but resolute, began planning ways to honor her memory. Her mother, Patty, placed photos of Rachel along the trail, a quiet tribute to her daughter's vibrant life. The sheriff's office, meanwhile, was relentless, following every lead. As investigators dug deeper, they wondered, was Rachel targeted because of her routine, or was she simply in the wrong place at the wrong time? The trail's quiet culvert had revealed its grim secret, but the answers to who did this and why remained just out of reach. The hunt for Rachel's killer became a meticulous, multi-state effort, fueled by forensic breakthroughs, witness accounts, and a community determined to see justice served. Her Apple Watch data, showing a heart rate spike at 7:07 p.m. on August 5th, followed by a rapid decline, gave them a narrow window for the crime, between 7:07 and 7:09 p.m. This meant the attack was swift, likely carried out by someone who acted decisively. The lack of immediate witnesses to anything unusual frustrated detectives, but it also suggested the perpetrator knew how to avoid attention. The sheriff's office expanded their interviews, reaching out to Rachel's family, friends, and colleagues to uncover any possible motives or connections. Her boyfriend, Richard Tobin, was questioned again. Detectives asked about their relationship, whether Rachel had mentioned any concerns, or if anyone had shown unusual interest in her. Richard, shaken but cooperative, insisted their relationship was strong and that Rachel hadn't mentioned any threats. She was happy, always planning stuff with the kids, he told investigators.
One question we have continued to get centers around whether we have interviewed the boyfriend in this case. The answer is yes, we have, along with many other people who are close to Rachel. That is the way an investigation is conducted. We start with people who are in her close inner circle and others who have may known her or she have encountered and work outward.
The absence of personal conflicts pointed toward a random act, but detectives weren't ready to rule anything out. The breakthrough DNA match announced on August 17th was a game changer. DNA from Rachel's crime scene, analyzed by the Maryland State Police Crime Lab, matched evidence from a March 2023 home invasion in Los Angeles, where a young girl and her mother had been assaulted. The Los Angeles Police Department provided surveillance footage from the incident, showing a shirtless man, approximately 5 feet 9 inches tall, with dark hair, leaving the home. Colonel William Davis of the Harford County Sheriff's Office explained the significance. "We collected DNA from the crime scene. The Maryland State Police analyzed that DNA for us, ran it through the National CODIS system, and that came back as a match to the crime that occurred in Los Angeles." The video didn't reveal the man's face clearly, but it offered a physical profile. Hispanic, in his mid-20s to 30s, weighing about 160 pounds. Investigators believed this was their suspect, but without a name, they were chasing a shadow. To build a clearer picture, detectives traveled to Los Angeles to work with local police and interview the victims of the home invasion. The family provided critical details, describing the suspect's build and behavior, though they couldn't identify him. The Los Angeles case had left behind a ball cap and a water bottle, both containing DNA that matched the Maryland scene. The team distributed thousands of bilingual flyers in Maryland and California, offering a $30,000 reward for information leading to an arrest. They hoped someone in either community might recognize the man from the video or recall seeing him near the trail. Back in Bel Air, investigators pursued local leads. They reviewed hours of surveillance footage from businesses near the trailhead, including a brewery and a Domino's pizza shop. Sheriff Galler later shared, "We've collected and watched hours of video footage from in and around the trail where she disappeared. The footage showed no clear images of the suspect, but it confirmed Rachel's car parked at the Williams Street entrance." Detectives also interviewed residents along the trail, asking about unfamiliar faces in the days leading up to August 5th. Several witnesses reported seeing a man matching the suspect's description in late July, lingering near the trail. One local told police they'd seen a man in a red and black Air Jordan cap near the trailhead, a detail that would later inform a suspect sketch. These sightings suggested the suspect may have been in Bel Air for days, possibly observing the area or even Rachel herself. The investigation wasn't limited to Maryland and California. The team conducted over 100 interviews and followed up on more than 1,000 tips, as reported by the Harford County Sheriff's Office. They worked with 10 federal, state, and local agencies, casting a wide net across 7 states. The FBI's Baltimore field office joined the effort, bringing expertise in forensic analysis and behavioral profiling. A criminal profiler, Pat Brown, created a behavioral profile of the suspect, which Rachel's family distributed to raise awareness. The profile suggested a bold, opportunistic individual, possibly with a history of violent crimes, aligning with Sheriff Gaylor's fear that the suspect could be a serial offender. The violence associated with Rachel's case shows he has absolutely no care, no regard for human life, Galler told Fox News Digital. "I believe he will continue to do it until he's captured." The sheriff's office also explored whether Rachel's routine made her a target. She jogged the Ma and Pa trail almost daily, often in the evenings, a pattern prosecutors later noted was predictable. This raised the chilling possibility that the suspect had watched her, waiting for the right moment. As months passed, the pressure mounted. The sheriff's office released a composite sketch on February 12, 2024, based on witness descriptions and the Los Angeles footage. One sketch showed the suspect with short black hair, another with the Air Jordan cap. The reward grew to $35,000. The focus remained on the unidentified man from the Los Angeles video. The lack of a name frustrated investigators, but the DNA evidence kept them hopeful. They knew they were looking for someone who'd left a trace in 2 states, someone who moved with purpose and evaded capture. Was he still in Maryland, blending into the community? Or had he fled, leaving behind only fragments of evidence? As the investigation pushed into spring 2024, a new lead surfaced, one that would take detectives far from Bel Air and closer to the truth. What they uncovered would finally give a name to the shadow they'd been chasing. The breakthrough came on May 20th, 2024, Rachel's 38th birthday, when a lead from genetic genealogy gave investigators a name: Victor Antonio Martinez Hernandez. This discovery, described by Sheriff Jeffrey Galler as a poetic coincidence or perhaps Rachel's own divine assistance, set the stage for a dramatic arrest that would finally bring a face to the shadow haunting Bel Air. But who was this man, and how had he evaded capture for so long? The arrest unfolded on June 14, 2024, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, nearly 1,200 miles from the crime scene. Harford County Sheriff's Detective Phil Golden had received a critical tip from the Maryland State Police Crime Lab. DNA from items provided by Martinez Hernandez's cousins, a toothbrush, dirty clothes, and a pair of Fila sneakers, matched the DNA found on Rachel's body. With an arrest warrant secured, investigators needed to locate him. They turned to T-Mobile, requesting a ping of his cell phone, which revealed his location at Los Dos Amigos sports bar in Tulsa. Tulsa Police Detective Kylie Delmont led the operation, approaching the bar with her team late that night. A security guard initially claimed Martinez Hernandez wasn't there, but soon pointed them to a man sitting casually at the bar. "We ended up finding him," Delmont later testified, noting that he repeatedly gave a false name, Juan Carlos, and denied any knowledge of the crimes. His distinctive teeth, visible in photos, helped confirm his identity. By 11:30 p.m., Martinez Hernandez was in custody, ending a 10-month manhunt.
Did you?
Sí. Ajá.
Where are you from? Where do you live? What state? From El Salvador? Is that where you're from? Oh, yeah. No. El Salvador, is that where you live? Yeah. Victor Antonio Martinez Hernandez, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Martinez Hernandez, a 23-year-old from El Salvador, was born on September 19, 2000. Little is known about his early life, but he had a daughter and ties to Salvadoran street gangs, according to Sheriff Galler. His criminal history began in El Salvador, where an arrest warrant was issued in January 2023 for the murder of a young woman. Fleeing to escape justice, he attempted to enter the United States multiple times. U.S. Border Patrol apprehended and deported him under Title 42 on January 19 and February 6, 2023, near Santa Teresa, New Mexico, and on January 31 near El Paso, Texas. Each time, no criminal history was found in U.S. databases, allowing his release. On February 13, 2023, he crossed illegally near El Paso without detection, entering the U.S. for good. Once in the U.S., Martinez Hernandez's movements were transient but deliberate. By March 2023, he was in Los Angeles, where he was linked to a home invasion involving the assault of a 9-year-old girl and her mother. DNA from a ball cap and water bottle left at the scene later matched the Maryland crime. He surfaced in Bel Air by summer 2023, living less than a mile from the Ma and Pa Trail at a house on George Street with a friend, Marcos Campos Guevara. He worked at local restaurants, including Barrett's on the Pike and Popeyes, blending into the community. Witnesses, including his cousins Jose and Tanya Hernandez, confirmed he was in Bel Air during August 2023, but he vanished abruptly a month after Rachel's death, leaving behind socks, a toothbrush, sneakers, and other items, which later provided crucial DNA evidence. After fleeing Maryland, Martinez Hernandez moved through Virginia and Prince George's County, Maryland, staying with an aunt in Temple Hills. By May 2024, he was in Tulsa, where his phone revealed chilling details: searches for the Bel Air area, a screenshot of a news report about Rachel's case, and words like Rachel, Morin, and asesino, Spanish for murderer, in his user dictionary. Harford County Sheriff's digital forensic supervisor Heather Marsh testified that he had watched YouTube news reports about the investigation, suggesting he was tracking the case's progress. During questioning after his arrest, Martinez Hernandez waived his Miranda rights after requesting an attorney and spoke with detectives. He denied ever being in Maryland or knowing Rachel, claiming, "In reality, I don't know. Today, there is so much technology, anyone could do damage to anyone." When confronted with the DNA evidence, he suggested someone might have planted it to frame him. These denials clashed with the evidence, including his phone data and witness testimony placing him in Bel Air. On June 18, 2024, Martinez Hernandez was extradited to Maryland, arriving at Martin State Airport and transferred to the Harford County Detention Center. He faced charges of first-degree murder, first-degree rape, third-degree sexual offense, and kidnapping. Prosecutors, led by Harford County State's Attorney Allison Healy, alleged the attack was planned, citing Rachel's predictable jogging routine and the secluded culvert where she was found. They argued he hid in the woods, possibly with a shovel, waiting for the right moment. His criminal history painted a troubling picture. Beyond the El Salvador murder and the Los Angeles assault, Sheriff Galler described him as a potential serial killer, citing his repeated criminal activity in Central America and the United States. The arrest brought relief to Rachel's family. Patty Morin, Rachel's mother, spoke at a press conference, her voice heavy with emotion.
And it just gave me such hope that they really did care about our family and my daughter, that they were going to work diligently to find the person that murdered her.
The community too exhaled, but the arrest raised new questions. How had Martinez Hernandez moved so freely across states? The trial began on April 1st, 2025, in the Harford County Circuit Court, presided over by Judge Yolanda L. Curtin. Jury selection, a contentious process due to the case's high profile, took 3 days, with nearly 400 potential jurors screened to ensure impartiality. The defense, led by Assistant Public Defenders Marcus Jenkins, Sawyer Hicks, and Tara LeCompte, had argued that pretrial publicity, amplified by national media and mentions in a March 2025 executive order by President Donald Trump, made a fair trial in Harford County impossible. They requested a change of venue and a juror questionnaire, but both motions were denied. I have no doubt they're going to be able to find 12 jurors who are going to be fair and impartial, said Randolph Rice, the Morin family's attorney, addressing concerns about bias. By April 3rd, a jury of 10 men, 2 women, and 6 alternates was seated, ready to hear a case that had gripped the nation. Opening statements set the stage for a stark contrast in narratives. Harford County State's Attorney Allison Healy, prosecuting the case herself alongside Deputy State's Attorney David Ryden, presented a meticulous timeline of Rachel's final moments. She described how Martinez Hernandez, a 24-year-old Salvadoran national, ambushed Rachel between 7:04 and 7:10 p.m. on August 5, 2023, dragging her 150 feet to a drainage culvert where the attack occurred. You don't accomplish a rape and a murder in 4 to 6 minutes unless you have a plan, Healy told the jury, emphasizing premeditation. She highlighted DNA evidence found on Rachel's wrist, neck, and Apple Watch, as well as digital forensics from Martinez Hernandez's phone, which included searches for Bel Air, Rachel, and Asesino, and cached YouTube videos about the case. The prosecution called 32 witnesses over 9 days, weaving a compelling case. Rachel's daughters, Violet Custer and Faye McMahon, testified about their final texts with their mother around 7 p.m., which went unanswered, signaling the moment she was attacked. Richard Tobin, Rachel's boyfriend, recounted finding her car at the trailhead and his frantic calls to her unanswered phone. Volunteers Evan Knapp and Cecilia Ocorso described their harrowing discovery of Rachel's body, following a trail of bloody rocks to the culvert. I feel like time froze for a second, Knapp testified, recalling the shock of seeing her body. Sheriff's Detective Phil Golden detailed Martinez Hernandez's interrogation, where he denied being in Maryland or knowing Rachel, even as evidence mounted. Forensic scientist Tiffany Keener confirmed that Martinez Hernandez's DNA was the only male profile found at the scene, corroborated by 6 reports from the Maryland State Police Crime Lab. Digital forensic examiner Megan Waltemeyer pinpointed Rachel's time of death using her Apple Watch data, showing a heart rate spike at 7:07 p.m., followed by a rapid drop. The prosecution also presented testimony placing Martinez Hernandez in Bel Air for 5 months around the time of the crime. His cousins, Jose and Tanya Hernandez, confirmed he lived with them on George Street, less than a mile from the trail, and worked at local restaurants like Barrett's on the Pike and Popeyes. A witness, Kyle Stacy, testified to seeing a man in the woods near the trail moments before spotting Rachel, though his description, a tall, muscular man with a blonde beard, didn't match Martinez Hernandez, creating a potential point of contention. Another witness testified that Martinez Hernandez was seen with a shovel in the woods, suggesting he may have planned to conceal his actions. The prosecution argued this evidence, combined with the Los Angeles DNA match, painted a clear picture of a calculated predator. The defense, in contrast, presented a brief case, resting after calling one witness for less than 10 minutes on April 14th. They argued there were gaps in the evidence and questioned the motive, suggesting the crime was personal rather than random. Defense attorney Sawyer Hicks claimed Rachel attracted a lot of male attention, and that her recent relationship with Richard Tobin might have provoked jealousy in others. This was not a crime committed by a complete stranger, Hicks told the jury. This is someone who had a grievance, someone who wanted to humiliate Rachel Morin. They also attempted to cast doubt on the DNA evidence, with Martinez Hernandez claiming in his interrogation that someone could have planted it to frame him. During cross-examination, they questioned whether the DNA was properly collected and suggested that items like a backpack found in Tulsa might not belong to Martinez Hernandez, as multiple people lived in the home. However, these arguments failed to sway the jury. Closing arguments on April 14th were emotional. Healy reiterated the strength of the DNA evidence, stating, "Rachel lived her worst nightmare that day, and she never got to wake up and tell anyone. Her body told us what happened and who did it." The defense urged jurors to consider the lack of a clear motive and the witness description that didn't match their client. After less than an hour of deliberation, 46 minutes to be precise, the jury returned a unanimous guilty verdict on all charges: first-degree premeditated murder, first-degree rape, third-degree sexual offense, and kidnapping. Martinez Hernandez showed no visible reaction as the verdict was read, while Rachel's family, present every day in the courtroom, wept quietly. The consequences for Rachel's family were profound. Patty Morin, her mother, had been a vocal advocate for justice, appearing with Donald Trump during the 2024 presidential campaign and testifying before Congress about immigration policies. The trial was an emotional ordeal, with Patty visibly shaking when she saw Martinez Hernandez in court. However, the trial also sparked controversy, as Rachel's children filed a lawsuit against Patty and her sister, alleging they hadn't received funds from a trust meant for them, highlighting lingering tensions. Sentencing is scheduled for August 11, 2025, with prosecutors seeking consecutive sentences, potentially exceeding life without parole. "I hope that Judge Curtin considers that this was a violent and brutal and vicious attack," Healy said, emphasizing the crime's severity. As of June 2025, no new updates have emerged since the April 14th verdict. Martinez Hernandez remains in the Harford County Detention Center without bail, awaiting sentencing. The trial answered who took Rachel's life, but questions linger. Why did Martinez Hernandez choose her? Was it truly random, or was there a motive the evidence couldn't uncover? For now, the Ma and Pa Trail stands as a somber reminder of a life cut short and a family left to find peace in justice's shadow. If this case gripped you as much as it did us, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into true crime. Share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think justice looks like for Rachel's family? Thanks for joining us on this journey, and we'll see you in the next one. Stay curious, stay safe, and keep chasing the truth with Checkered Sky. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Checkered Sky channel where we dive into true crime stories. Today, we're diving into a chilling tale from Toronto, Canada that shook a community to its core. This is the story of Stefanie Rengel, a vibrant 14-year-old whose life was cut tragically short on New Year's Day 2008. On January 1st, 2008, while most of Toronto was recovering from New Year's Eve celebrations, a quiet neighborhood in East York was about to become the scene of a heartbreaking true crime mystery. Stefanie Rengel, a bright and bubbly 14-year-old, stepped out of her family's home on a crisp winter afternoon. Stefanie was a typical teen, active on social media, navigating the ups and downs of high school and dreaming of her future. That day, she left her house to meet someone, a decision that would lead to a chain of events no one could have predicted. The call came into Toronto police just after 6 p.m. A passerby had found a young girl lying in the snow near a residential street, barely conscious, surrounded by a chilling scene. Emergency responders rushed to the scene, but despite their efforts, Stefanie Rengel was pronounced dead at the hospital. The news sent shockwaves through the community. This wasn't a high-crime area. East York was the kind of place where kids rode bikes and neighbors knew each other. How could something so unthinkable happen to a girl like Stefanie? Police immediately launched an investigation, combing the area for clues. They interviewed neighbors, asking if anyone had seen anything unusual that evening. The detectives worked tirelessly, piecing together her final moments. What they found was puzzling. Stefanie had received a phone call just before she left her house, luring her outside. But who was on the other end of that call? And why would anyone target a teenager with no apparent ties to trouble? The police uncovered a web of relationships, friendships, rivalries, and emotions that pointed to someone close to Stefanie's world. This wasn't a random act. Someone had a motive, and it was rooted in the messy, intense dynamics of teenage life. As investigators dug deeper, they learned Stefanie had been navigating a typical teenage social circle. She had friends, a few romantic interests, and the usual high school drama. But one relationship stood out, a past connection that seemed to linger in the background. Someone had orchestrated this tragedy, and the clues were starting to point toward a shocking evil. Now we're going to get to know Stefanie, who she was, the family she loved, and the world she lived in. At 14, she was a grade 9 student at Rosedale Heights School of the Arts, a place known for nurturing creative spirits. Friends described her as vibrant, with a quick wit and a passion for music that shone through in everything she did. Whether she was singing along to her favorite songs or hanging out with her tight-knit group of friends, Stefanie had a way of making people feel seen. She was the girl who'd text you a silly joke just to make you smile, the one who dreamed big despite the challenges of teenage life. Stefanie's home life was shaped by love, but also by change. Her parents had divorced when she was younger, and she lived with her mother, Patricia Hung, and her stepfather, James Hung, in their East York home. Both Patricia and James were Toronto police officers, dedicated to serving their community. Their careers meant Stefanie grew up with a strong sense of right and wrong, but also with parents who were often busy with demanding jobs. Still, those close to the family said Patricia and James were devoted to Stefanie, creating a home filled with warmth and support. Patricia, in particular, was known for her fierce love for her daughter, always encouraging Stefanie to chase her dreams. But like any teenager, Stefanie's life wasn't without its complexities. She was navigating the whirlwind of high school, new friendships, first crushes, and the occasional drama that comes with being 14. Stefanie's life seemed ordinary on the surface, a loving family, a supportive home, a bright future. But beneath it all, something was brewing, something tied to the people she knew. 2 years before that tragic January day, in 2006, Stefanie Rengel was just years old, a bright and curious girl starting to explore the social whirl of adolescence. It was then that she crossed paths with David Bagshaw, year-old student who moved in some of the same East York circles. Their connection was brief, lasting only a couple of weeks, and typical of young teens. a mix of shy conversations, group hangouts, and the thrill of a first crush. They would meet in the park near her house or have lunch together at a pizza joint. She was flattered by the attention of a broad-shouldered high school football player. But after David left a message on her home number expressing a desire for a more intense relationship, and you can certainly guess what's behind the phrase intense relationship, Patricia told Stefanie to stay away from him. Stefanie was angry her mother didn't trust her to resist David's advances. Eventually, though, she agreed to move on. Their brief relationship left an impression on him, even if it was just a blip in Stefanie's world. For most, that would have been the end of it, a teenage crush consigned to the past. But David didn't take the rejection lightly. Friends noted he seemed stung, perhaps embarrassed, by Stefanie's dismissal. There was someone else in his life, someone who amplified his emotions and turned a faded connection into something far more dangerous. Melissa Todorovich was 15 years old in late 2007, a high school student in Toronto's East York known for her magnetic yet intense personality. Friends described her as charismatic, with a knack for drawing people in, but also fiercely possessive. She grew up in a middle-class family, with no major red flags, but those who knew her noticed a need for control that defined her relationships. When Melissa met David Bagshaw, now 18, in mid-2007, she found someone she could mold. David was quiet, impressionable, and still carrying the weight of his brief past with Stefanie, which he occasionally mentioned despite their long separation. David and Melissa's relationship quickly intensified. They spent hours texting, calling, and meeting up, with Melissa steering the dynamic. To David, she was a source of validation, especially after Stefanie's rejection of his 2007 attempt to reconnect. Melissa, however, saw David as hers to command. Their bond grew through shared conversations, but it was Melissa's influence that set the tone. David was not an ideal boyfriend. He wasn't faithful to Melissa. His parents, Ronald and Cindy Bagshaw, were separated. He was diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 3, and he had behavioral problems and aggressive outbursts in school. By junior high, he was frequently absent from class and suspended numerous times for swearing and fighting. At 14, he was charged with assaulting his mother, though the charge was withdrawn when he agreed to attend anger management classes. After this incident, he moved back and forth between his parents' homes, and at 15, he lived in a group home for 3 months. Almost from the start, his relationship with Melissa was stormy, marked by jealousy and possessiveness. David's father found Melissa controlling and didn't allow her in his home. He didn't like that she left contemptuous notes for David's mother, saying she wasn't a good parent. He was also disturbed that Melissa had installed a spyware program on David's computer so she could monitor his use. Although Melissa had never met Stefanie, she knew that Stefanie had once gone out with David. After David remarked he thought Stefanie was pretty, Melissa began to obsessively examine her pictures on Facebook. Stefanie told Melissa's cousin that David was bad news and that he'd been flirting with her and other girls behind Melissa's back. When this information got back to Melissa, she was furious. Melissa's parents urged her to call off the relationship, but she didn't listen. Who's going to look at somebody with braces and glasses when there's so many pretty girls in high school? She asked her mother. If Stefanie had the confidence to pull off a whimsical look, Melissa was a conformist. She wore glasses and braces and was filled with anxiety about her appearance, in particular, her weight. She disliked her breasts, too small, her hands, too chubby, and her toes, too long, and wanted plastic surgery to fix her nose, too bumpy. Every morning, she would spend a half hour in the bathroom, carefully straightening her wavy hair. On rainy days, she'd take a straightening iron to school. She suffered from occasional bouts of bulimia and was convinced she needed a boyfriend to validate herself. Melissa fixated on Stefanie whenever David talked about her, even casually. As reported in a 2009 Toronto Life article, Melissa Todorovich and David Bagshaw fantasized about how they wanted to hurt and humiliate David's ex-girlfriend. turning a faded memory into a dangerous obsession. Melissa's resentment of Stefanie was irrational but consuming. Though Stefanie had no contact with David since 2006, Melissa viewed her as a rival, a symbol of David's past that threatened her control. She'd never met Stefanie, but she knew details from David: her music taste, her popularity, her vibrancy. These fueled Melissa's jealousy. As friends later told police, she spoke of Stefanie with venom, fixating on her as an obstacle. What started as bitter comments evolved into something darker. Melissa began planting seeds in David's mind, presenting Stefanie as a constant threat to their relationship and capitalizing on his unresolved feelings from nearly 2 years ago. By November 2007, Melissa's manipulations grew calculated. She used David's emotional vulnerability, stoking his lingering hurt over Stefanie's rejection. She'd praise David's loyalty, then threaten to pull away, saying things like, "If you don't deal with her, I might just talk to her myself," a jab at his insecurities. She also hinted that their physical relationship, which we'll call contact given their ages, hinged on his actions. She told David that there would be no close contact between them until he took Stefanie's life. This wasn't teenage drama, it was psychological warfare. Melissa's texts, uncovered by police, showed her pushing David to prove his devotion. She'd write, "Show me you're mine," then go silent when he hesitated, leaving him desperate. Melissa's jokes about harming Stefanie, as she later claimed, became a plan. She told David to call Stefanie, pretend he wanted to talk, and lure her to a quiet street near her home. When David balked, she'd reply, "Do it for us," or threaten to end things, tightening her grip. On the night of November 20th, after much haranguing from Melissa, David walked to Stefanie's home and phoned her from the driveway, ostensibly to lure her out of the house. But when she came outside, he couldn't go through with it. "Melissa wants me to stab you," he told her to her face. Then he threw down his cell phone and walked away, saying, "When she calls, tell her I tried, so she'll stop pestering me to kill you." The incident frightened the normally unflappable Stefanie, and she immediately went to her mother. Patricia called Melissa and warned her to stay away from her daughter. But Melissa wasn't easily intimidated. Patricia threatened to get a restraining order against her and ended the call. The Hungs returned David's cell phone to his mother and asked her to keep her son away from Stefanie. David's mother agreed this was a good idea. Patricia, though initially concerned, wrote the incident off as teenage melodrama and decided not to involve police. Court records show David resisted at first, texting, "I'm not sure I can do this." Melissa's response was unrelenting, with messages like, "You will, or we're over." Her manipulation exploited David's need for her approval, turning his faded feelings for Stefanie into a mission. By New Year's Eve, Melissa's pressure peaked. Late-night calls reinforced her demands, with Melissa urging David to follow through. No excuses. On January 1st, 2008, Melissa shut David out. He texted her 3 times. "Where are you? You're cheating. Why won't you answer me?" At 3 p.m., Melissa called him back, and they spoke for 15 minutes. She reminded him of her plans to go on top with another boy. After dozens more calls and texts, at 5:51 p.m., David called Melissa and said he was on his way to Stefanie's house with a knife. They spoke a few more times, Melissa calling David at 6 p.m. and 6:04 before he made the fateful call to Stefanie at 6:08. This time it worked. She came running out of her house. At that moment, Melissa called David. "I see her," he said, and ended the call. What happened next unfolded quickly, in a way that shocked even seasoned investigators. David, following Melissa's plan, met Stefanie on that quiet street. The encounter wasn't a conversation, it was a calculated act. Out of respect for the sensitivity of this case and Stefanie's age, we'll avoid graphic details, but court records confirm that David used a knife, a weapon he'd brought with him, to carry out Melissa's vision. Stefanie, caught off guard, had no chance to defend herself. Within minutes, she was left in the snow, struggling to hold on. David, panicked but driven by Melissa's influence, fled the scene, leaving Stefanie alone in the cold. Melissa waited 15 minutes, then called Stefanie's phone and was satisfied when she didn't get an answer. After he stabbed Stefanie, David fled to a friend's house nearby, threw away the knife, and buried his blood-stained jacket in the snow in the backyard. He then phoned Melissa to tell her he'd done it. She told David to take a taxi to her house so he could collect his reward. On his way, he sent a text to Melissa. "I love you, honey. I can't wait to see you." When he arrived, Melissa had him reenact the killing. Then, after a close contact between them, she called her mother to pick her up a latte. At around 6 p.m., a passerby walking their dog noticed a figure in the snow and rushed closer. It was Stefanie, barely conscious, her breath shallow. The neighbor dialed 911, their voice trembling as they described the scene to the operator. "There's a girl here. She's hurt bad. Please hurry," they pleaded, according to emergency call logs later released. Paramedics and police arrived within minutes, but despite their efforts to save her, Stefanie was pronounced dead at the hospital shortly after. The news hit like a thunderbolt. A 14-year-old girl, gone, in a neighborhood where such tragedies were unthinkable. Toronto police launched into action, treating the case as a top priority crime investigation. The crime scene yielded immediate clues, traces of blood in the snow, footprints, and a sense that this wasn't a random act. Detectives canvassed the area, knocking on doors and asking neighbors if they'd seen anyone suspicious. They learned about the phone call that lured Stefanie out, and her phone records quickly pointed to David Bagshaw. Police brought him in for questioning on January 2nd. During the interrogation, David was nervous, his story inconsistent. He claimed he hadn't seen Stefanie that day, but when confronted with phone records showing his call, he crumbled. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he admitted, according to a Toronto Star report from 2009, though he tried to downplay his role. The real breakthrough came when police seized David's phone. Hundreds of text messages between him and Melissa painted a damning picture. Melissa's messages were relentless, urging David to act, giving him step-by-step instructions, and even checking in during the crime. When police brought Melissa in for questioning, she initially played innocent, claiming she and David were just joking about Stefanie. But under pressure, she admitted to encouraging David, though she insisted it wasn't serious. "I didn't think he'd actually do it," she said, per court records, a claim investigators found hard to believe given the volume of her texts. The police re-interviewed Melissa later that morning on a charge of first-degree murder. With her mother at her side, Melissa declined her right to speak to a lawyer. She admitted that killing Stefanie was more her idea than David's.
Okay, so he phones you, and he says, "I have a knife with an 8-inch blade, and I'm going to Stefanie's house." What was your response to that?
Like, okay, do whatever you want.
And what did that mean? What did you take that to mean when you said that? What did you mean when you said, "Okay, do whatever you want"?
I meant, if you want to kill her, kill her.
Did you say that, those words?
I said, do whatever you want.
Well, that's not if you want to kill her, kill her.
You just said, what did I mean?
So he phones you and he says, "I have an 8-inch blade knife, and I'm going to Stefanie's house." And your response is, "Do whatever you want." What did he say to that?
Can't remember.
Did you think of calling 911 and reporting that there was a guy undelivered to a young girl's house with a knife to kill her?
No.
How come?
The evidence was overwhelming. Police recovered the knife from the sewer, its blade matching the wounds described in the coroner's report. David's discarded jacket was found, with blood traces linking it to Stefanie. Melissa's phone records showed she'd been in constant contact with David before, during, and after the crime, orchestrating every move. On January 3, 2008, both David Bagshaw and Melissa Todorovich were arrested. David was charged with first-degree murder, while Melissa faced the same charge, accused of masterminding the act. The case stunned Toronto. Two teenagers, driven by jealousy and manipulation, had committed an unthinkable crime. The investigation didn't stop with the arrests. Detectives worked to understand the full scope of Melissa's influence, combing through thousands of text messages and interviewing friends who confirmed her obsession with Stefanie. One friend told police, as quoted in a 2009 Global News report, that Melissa talked about Stefanie like she was the enemy, even though they'd never met. The evidence painted a clear picture. Melissa's manipulations had turned David into her instrument, exploiting his emotions to devastating ends. The impact of Stefanie's loss was profound. Her mother, Patricia Hung, and stepfather, James Hung, both police officers, were shattered. Patricia later spoke publicly, describing Stefanie as my light, my reason for everything. The family struggled to reconcile their grief with the senselessness of the crime, especially knowing it came from someone Stefanie barely knew. Stefanie's father, estranged but still close to her, was equally devastated, attending memorials to honor his daughter's memory. The Hung household, once filled with Stefanie's laughter, fell silent, a void that no justice could fill. Rosedale Heights School of the Arts, where Stefanie studied, set up a memorial fund in her name, channeling donations to music programs she loved. Neighbors organized vigils, leaving flowers and notes at the spot where Stefanie fell. The case sparked conversations about teenage relationships, the power of manipulation, and the dangers lurking in seemingly ordinary lives. For many, it was a wake-up call that crime wasn't just something that happened far away, it could strike close to home. The arrests of David Bagshaw and Melissa Todorovich in January 2008 marked the beginning of a high-profile true crime case that gripped Toronto. David, 17, and Melissa, 15, at the time of the crime, faced charges of first-degree murder, a serious accusation that carried adult-level consequences despite their youth. The case proceeded to trial in 2009, with separate trials for each to ensure impartiality. Held at the Ontario Superior Court of Justice, the proceedings drew intense public scrutiny, as the city struggled to comprehend how two teenagers could orchestrate such a calculated act. Stefanie's family, including her mother, Patricia Hung, and stepfather, James Hung, attended every session, their presence a quiet testament to their loss. David Bagshaw's trial kicked off in early 2009. The prosecution, led by Crown attorneys, built a meticulous case, arguing that David's actions were deliberate and premeditated. They presented the recovered knife, the blood-stained jacket he discarded, and phone records showing his call to lure Stefanie. Hundreds of texts from Melissa urging him to act were central to their case, as was David's interrogation confession, where he said, "I did it, but she told me to." The prosecution stressed that David, at 17, made a conscious choice to follow Melissa's plan, fully aware of the consequences. David's defense team acknowledged his role but pushed for a lesser charge, such as second-degree murder or manslaughter. They argued that David was heavily influenced by Melissa, a charismatic 15-year-old who exploited his emotional vulnerabilities. They highlighted his youth, noting that at 17 he was still impressionable, and pointed to Melissa's relentless texts as evidence of coercion. However, the jury found the prosecution's evidence overwhelming. To Stefanie's family, "I am so sorry," Bagshaw said. Then, addressing his victim, Bagshaw said, "Stefanie, I am sorry. I want to ask for forgiveness but realize I can't even forgive myself. I hate myself for the decision I made that night." He added that he deserves whatever sentence he gets. "I will bear the very heavy burden of what I did forever. Not one day will go by when I don't regret what I did." After a 2-week trial, David was convicted of first-degree murder on April 22, 2009. As a youth offender, He received a life sentence with parole eligibility after 10 years, a ruling that fueled debates about sentencing young offenders. In his decision, Ontario Superior Court Justice Ian Nordheimer noted that 2 psychiatrists who presented pre-sentencing reports believe Bagshaw could be rehabilitated with proper treatment. All of those mitigating factors cannot, however, overcome the nature of David's actions, the planned and deliberate killing of a young girl who he apparently liked and who liked him, Nordheimer told the court. Melissa Todorovich's trial followed in July 2009, and it was a media firestorm. The prosecution portrayed her as the mastermind, a 15-year-old whose jealousy and need for control drove the crime. They introduced over 6,000 text messages between Melissa and David, many explicitly outlining the plan to target Stefanie. The prosecution argued that Melissa's manipulations, including threats to end their relationship or withhold close contact, made her equally responsible, despite not being physically present. The judge called her actions truly evil. Melissa's defense team countered that she was a troubled teen, not a criminal genius. They claimed her texts were hyperbolic, part of a fantasy she didn't expect David to act on, and pointed to her age, 15, as a mitigating factor. They introduced psychological assessments suggesting Melissa had emotional issues, though no formal diagnosis was confirmed in court. "I want you to know that I take full responsibility for my part. I know it's hard for you to believe me when I say that," Melissa said. "I feel very bad for the lives I've ruined and affected. I know you may never forgive me for what I caused, and I understand that, but I wanted to share my apology with you." Melissa said she wishes she could go back and change everything, because no one should have to lose someone they love in a violent, horrific way. The teenager added that she feels bad for the lives she has ruined, but added she still believes she can still contribute to society in a positive way. The Crown dismissed what it called an 11th-hour apology, reminding the court that 2 psychiatrists said Melissa continues to see herself as a victim and lacked empathy. The defense argued that an adult life sentence was too severe for someone so young. But the jury disagreed. After a brief deliberation, Melissa was convicted of first-degree murder on July 28, 2009. She was sentenced as an adult to life with no chance of parole for 7 years, the maximum allowed for someone under 16. Next, we'll talk about parole. The convictions brought a bittersweet sense of closure for Stefanie's family. The verdicts validated their loss, but no sentence could undo their grief. Years passed, and the case evolved. David Bagshaw kept a low profile while serving his sentence in a Canadian prison. His parole eligibility began in 2018, but a 2021 Global News report indicated he was denied parole that year. He expressed remorse, telling the parole board, "I hate myself for what I did," but the board deemed him a continued risk. As of the latest information in 2025, David, approaching 35, remains incarcerated, with no confirmed parole or release. Melissa Todorovich's post-trial journey was more turbulent. Just 11 years into her sentence, she convinced the board to release her on day parole with pretty lenient conditions, continue counseling, and report any relationships. Within 2 months, Todorovich was back to her old ways. She'd sign herself out of her Brampton halfway house to conduct her clandestine affair with a high-risk offender she'd met at a group for former inmates. Unsatisfied with his sexual prowess, she then began a second secret affair with his best friend. When her deception came to light, Todorovich was hauled back to Grand Valley Institution for Women, and her day parole formally revoked in 2019. Todorovich, 27, had tried to convince the Parole Board of Canada that she had learned her lesson, that she now realizes she should have abided by her day parole conditions, and disclosed that she was in the midst of an unhealthy love triangle with 2 ex-cons. Melissa's parole struggles continued to draw attention. In January 2020, she lost an appeal to reverse her parole revocation, with the parole board citing her unwillingness or inability to comply fully. By 2024, Melissa, now in her early 30s, was granted 4 15-day unescorted absences from prison, a step toward reintegration. These absences allowed supervised temporary leaves to test her compliance. As of May 2025, Melissa remains in custody, with no evidence of full parole or permanent release. Her future depends on upcoming parole hearings. Stefanie's family, especially Patricia, continues to endure pain, with Patricia stating in 2020, "Every parole hearing reopens the wound." Stefanie Rengel's story transcends the boundaries of a true crime case. It's a stark reminder of how fragile life can be, how emotions can spiral, and how justice, even when served, can't heal all wounds. 17 years later, her family holds her memory close, and her community honors her through music scholarships and vigils. But one question remains: can true rehabilitation ever balance the loss of a life taken so young? Share your thoughts in the comments. That brings us to the close of Stefanie Rengel's story, a true crime tale that's as heartbreaking as it is thought-provoking. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the checkered sky. If this story touched you, please hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and share this video with your friends. Your support keeps us exploring cases that matter. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Checkered Sky channel where we dive into true crime stories. Today, we're diving into a chilling case from the streets of Chicago. A story so twisted it'll leave you questioning who you can really trust. This is the case of Yolanda Holmes, a woman whose life was cut short in a way no one saw coming. It was September 2nd, 2012, in Chicago's uptown neighborhood. Yolanda Holmes, a 45-year-old woman known for her warm smile and tireless work ethic, was at home in her apartment. Around 4 a.m., the stillness of her apartment was shattered. Yolanda wasn't alone. Her boyfriend, Curtis Wyatt, was staying over. What unfolded next was chaos. An intruder entered the apartment, and in a matter of moments, Yolanda's life was taken. Curtis was caught in the fray, injured and in need of urgent medical attention. The scene left investigators with more questions than answers. Who would target Yolanda? Was this a random act, or was there something deeper at play? Detectives noted the layout of Yolanda's home. Nothing seemed out of place, no signs of a forced break-in. Yet, the precision of the act suggested intent. Yolanda's loved ones were devastated, describing her as a pillar of strength, someone who didn't have enemies. But in true crime, things are rarely as simple as they seem. Investigators began their work, canvassing the neighborhood for witnesses. They wanted to know about Yolanda's life, her relationships, her routines. The police were tight-lipped, but one thing was clear: this wasn't a robbery gone wrong. Yolanda's belongings were untouched. The motive was a mystery, and the trail was already growing cold. For those of you hooked on true crime, cases like this grab you because they're layered. Yolanda's story isn't just about what happened that morning. It's about the web of connections, choices, and secrets that led to it. To understand this true crime puzzle, we need to step into Yolanda's life, a life filled with hard work, generosity, and unbreakable family ties. Let's explore who she was, the people she held close, and the bonds that shaped her world. Yolanda Holmes, at 45, was a force of nature. Standing just 5 feet tall, her nickname, Yogi, or Shorty, belied her larger-than-life presence. She owned Nappy Heads, a bustling hair salon on North Broadway, where she'd built a loyal clientele over 15 years. The salon wasn't just a business, it was a community hub. Yolanda hosted back-to-school parties, handing out supplies to kids, and opened her doors for local events. Her uncle, James Newman, described her as someone who always tried to help people. Friends like Ayanna Anderson, a stylist at Nappy Heads, echoed this, saying Yolanda's warmth made everyone feel like family. Her life wasn't without challenges. Yolanda was a single mother, pouring her heart into raising her only child, Kwame Wilson. Born when Yolanda was in her early 20s, Kwame was her pride and joy. She doted on him, buying him fancy clothes, jewelry, and a Mustang. When Kwame faced legal trouble over a BB gun, Yolanda hired an attorney. She even helped him land a job. Their bond was so strong that Kwame tattooed her name across his shoulder, and Yolanda reciprocated with his name inked on her. At nappy heads, Kwame was a familiar face, often hanging out as a salon baby, charming clients with his smile. To Yolanda, her son was her future, and she worked tirelessly to give him opportunities she never had. Less is known about Yolanda's romantic past, but her ex-husband cast a shadow. He was serving a life sentence for a double homicide, a fact that kept him distant from her later years. Detectives briefly considered him as a lead, wondering if his criminal ties could connect to the crime, but his incarceration made direct involvement unlikely. Yolanda had moved on, focusing on her salon and her son. Her on-again, off-again relationship with Curtis Wyatt, the boyfriend injured that morning, was rekindling at the time of the incident. Curtis's presence in the apartment raised questions, but police found no evidence tying him to the act. Still, his account of the intruder and their struggle left gaps investigators couldn't ignore. Let's dive into the critical first steps of the investigation, where every detail could lead closer to the truth, or deeper into the mystery. It all began with a frantic 911 call just after 4:15 a.m. on September 2, 2012. Curtis Wyatt, Yolanda's on-again, off-again boyfriend, dialed emergency services from her apartment in the 1000 block of West Montrose Avenue. His voice, strained with panic, reported an intruder who had attacked them while they slept. Curtis said he'd fought off the assailant, but Yolanda was unresponsive. He pleaded for help, his words punctuated by shock and urgency. Chicago PD officers arrived within minutes, securing the high-rise apartment building. They found Curtis, injured and shaken, with blood on his clothes and wounds that needed medical attention. Paramedics rushed him to a nearby hospital, where he was treated for cuts and bruises sustained in what he described as a struggle. The scene was grim, and detectives from the Chicago PD's homicide unit, including John Carolus and Michelle Wood, took charge. Their mission was clear: map the crime scene, collect evidence, and reconstruct the events that led to this tragedy. The apartment, part of the newly built Wilson Yard complex, was supposed to be a safe haven for Yolanda and her family. Now, it was a puzzle box of clues. The crime scene examination revealed a chaotic but contained struggle. In the bedroom, detectives found Yolanda's body, marked by a gunshot wound to the head and several stab wounds. The precision and intensity suggested what Michelle Wood, a fellow Chicago PD homicide detective, later called overkill, an act meant to ensure no chance of survival. Blood spatter covered the walls, painting a picture of a desperate fight. A gun with a broken handle lay on the bedroom floor. In the kitchen, investigators noticed a knife block missing a paring knife, which they later recovered near Yolanda's body. The weapon's absence from its usual place hinted at premeditation. Had the intruder known where to find it? Then there was an unusual find: a broken headphone cord or earpiece tangled among the bedroom's debris. Its presence raised eyebrows. Was it dropped by the intruder during the struggle? Each item, the gun, the knife, the earpiece, was bagged and sent for forensic analysis, potential keys to unlocking the case. Detectives turned their attention to Curtis Wyatt, the only other person known to be in the apartment that morning. As Yolanda's boyfriend, he was the first suspect. Curtis, still recovering in the hospital, was cooperative but rattled when detectives questioned him. He recounted the night's events. He and Yolanda had been rekindling their relationship and were asleep when an intruder burst in. Curtis claimed the man opened fire, striking Yolanda, and then attacked him. He described wrestling with the assailant, managing to disarm him before the man fled. Curtis insisted he chase the intruder out of the apartment, then returned to find Yolanda beyond help. His story explained his injuries and the broken gun, but one detail gnawed at investigators. There was no sign of forced entry. The apartment's door was intact, its locks undisturbed. How had the intruder gained access? Curtis's account, while plausible, left gaps that detectives couldn't ignore. To test his story, police brought Curtis in for a formal interrogation once he was discharged from the hospital. The questioning was intense but methodical, with detectives probing for inconsistencies. Curtis stuck to his narrative, describing the intruder as a man he didn't recognize, wearing headphones, a detail that matched the earpiece found at the scene. He denied any involvement in Yolanda's death, emphasizing their rekindled romance and his affection for her. But his demeanor, perhaps shaken by trauma, raised suspicions. To settle doubts, detectives offered Curtis a polygraph test, a tool often used to gauge truthfulness in high-stakes cases. Curtis agreed, perhaps hoping to clear his name. The results, however, were troubling. The polygraph indicated deception, suggesting Curtis might be withholding information. True crime fans know polygraphs aren't foolproof. They measure stress, not guilt. But the failure cast a shadow over Curtis's story. Detectives pressed harder, but without concrete evidence tying him to the act, they couldn't make an arrest. Curtis remained a person of interest, his role in the case unclear. The crime scene offered more clues through forensic analysis. Blood evidence painted a telling picture. Yolanda's blood was confined to the bedroom, concentrated around her body and the surrounding walls. Curtis's blood, however, was found in other areas, likely the hallway and living room, consistent with his claim of a struggle that moved through the apartment. This distribution suggested a third person's presence. If Curtis and Yolanda had fought alone, their blood would likely have mingled in the same space. The separation of blood pools indirectly supported Curtis's story of an intruder, though it didn't prove it. Detectives hoped DNA would provide a breakthrough. The broken earpiece was a prime candidate. Forensic techs tested it for biological evidence, recovering a DNA profile. They compared it to Yolanda, Curtis, and the National CODIS database, which holds millions of DNA records. The result? No match. The DNA belonged to an unknown individual, neither Yolanda nor Curtis, and it wasn't in the system. This was a double-edged sword. It bolstered the theory of a third person, but left investigators without a name. The lack of forced entry kept circling back to Curtis. Had he let someone in? Was he covering for someone? Detectives revisited the apartment's security footage, hoping to spot the intruder. Grainy video showed a man entering the building around the time of the incident, wearing headphones, just as Curtis described. The figure's face was unclear, but the earpiece tied him to the crime scene. The absence of a DNA match frustrated investigators, as did the polygraph's ambiguity. Curtis's injuries and the blood evidence suggested he'd fought someone, but his deception on the polygraph muddied the waters. Was he a victim, a liar, or something else? The gun and knife offered little help. Their surfaces were either too damaged or too clean for usable prints. The earpiece's DNA was their best lead, but without a suspect to compare it to, it was a dead end. Detectives canvassed Yolanda's building, interviewing neighbors who'd heard nothing unusual that morning. They checked her phone records and financials, looking for patterns. For now, Curtis remained in the spotlight, but the DNA and blood evidence hinted at a larger story. Who was the man in the headphones, and how did he slip into Yolanda's life so seamlessly? The uptown neighborhood of Chicago carried on, but for Yolanda Holmes's loved ones, time seemed to stand still. By late 2012, the investigation into her death at her Wilson Yard apartment had hit a wall. True crime cases often hinge on a single breakthrough, and for Chicago PD detectives John Carolus and Michelle Wood, that moment was coming. Let's follow the investigation as it takes a digital turn, unraveling a timeline and a trail of phone records that would change everything. The investigation, now months old, was under pressure. The community, still grieving, grew restless. Holmes, Yolanda's sister, told reporters she felt the police weren't prioritizing the case. Stylists at Nappy Heads, like Marcel Ray, echoed her frustration, noting detectives had visited the salon only once, right after the incident. Detectives, however, were working quietly, chasing leads that hadn't yet reached the public. They revisited the apartment building's surveillance footage, a critical piece of the puzzle. The grainy video, captured by cameras at the Wilson Yard complex, showed a man entering the main entrance at 4:32 a.m. that morning. He wore a hoodie, carried clothes on a hanger, and held a detergent bottle, an odd assortment for the pre-dawn hours. Most notably, he punched in an access code to enter, suggesting familiarity with the building. By 4:46 a.m., he exited, now in a different hoodie, passing a resident who later proved unrelated to the case. The 14-minute window aligned with Curtis's 911 call at 4:15 a.m., tightening the timeline of the incident. The man's headphones in the footage connected to the broken earpiece found in Yolanda's bedroom, but the DNA on it, as I said, didn't match anyone in the National CODIS database. Detectives needed more to identify him. They turned to Yolanda's life, looking for connections to someone who might have had access to her building's code. Her phone records became the next focus. Investigators discovered that Yolanda had 2 phones registered under her name, a detail that raised eyebrows. One phone, her primary device, was used for personal and business calls. The second phone's records opened a new avenue. Detectives mapped calls and texts from both devices, focusing on the days leading up to September 2nd. Yolanda's primary phone showed routine activity, calls to her sister Eunice, clients at Nappy Heads, and Curtis Wyatt. The second phone, however, told a different story. It was active in Uptown, making frequent calls to numbers Yolanda didn't typically contact. One number stood out. It appeared repeatedly in the hours before and after the incident. Cell phone records were crucial, Assistant State's Attorney Maura White later told the Chicago Tribune. The records also revealed texts, cryptic but suggestive of planning. One message, sent hours before the incident, referenced handling business. While not explicit, it hinted at coordination. Detectives needed to identify the users of these phones, but the pieces were falling into place. They interviewed Yolanda's inner circle again, asking about her generosity. Had she given a phone to someone? Her son, Kwame Wilson, came up. Kwame had been vocal about suspecting Curtis, telling Detective Wood he believed Wyatt was involved. But the phone records told a different story. The second phone's activity aligned with Kwame's movements, and the number it frequently called belonged to an associate named Eugene Spencer. This was the first time Spencer's name surfaced, a 22-year-old from Chicago's South Side. Detectives didn't jump to conclusions, they needed more. Surveillance footage was revisited with fresh eyes. The man in the hoodie, carrying a detergent bottle, didn't act like a stranger. His ease with the access code suggested he'd been to the building before. Detectives hypothesized he was either a resident or someone trusted by one. The detergent bottle was a curious detail, perhaps a prop to blend in, or a sign of a cleanup attempt. By mid-2013, the investigation was closing in. Detectives pulled financial records, noting Yolanda's bank accounts had been accessed post-mortem. Large withdrawals raised red flags. The second phone's record showed it was still active, now pinging in North Austin, miles from Uptown. Detectives tracked its movements, building a profile of its users' habits. Police also traced Eugene Spencer's number and found that around the same time Yolanda was killed, he was calling another woman, Loriana Johnson. Johnson, 23, lived in Chicago's far South Side. The phone records linked the three, Kwame, Spencer, and Johnson, in a web of communication that peaked around the crime. Spencer's phone showed he'd been near Yolanda's building that morning, his device pinging the same tower as the surveillance footage's timeline. The digital trail was undeniable. Someone Yolanda trusted had betrayed her. As 2013 drew to a close, the investigation into Yolanda Holmes's death was no longer a cold case. The second phone, registered to Yolanda, was in Kwame's possession, a gift from his mother to keep him connected. On December 22nd, detectives arrested Kwame Wilson, Yolanda's 24-year-old son, at his apartment in the North Austin neighborhood. The following day, December 23rd, they apprehended Eugene Spencer, 22, from the south side, and Loriana Johnson, 23, from the far south side. Kwame was charged with murder and home invasion, Spencer with first-degree murder, home invasion, and aggravated discharge of a firearm, and Johnson with murder and home invasion for her role as an accomplice. Cook County Judge Adam Bourgeois Jr., denying bail, called the crime a heinous act during their bond hearing. The news sent shockwaves through Uptown, where Yolanda's salon, Nappy Heads, remained a beacon of her legacy. How could her own son be involved? Kwame Wilson, born December 3, 1989, was Yolanda's pride and joy. Yolanda supported Kwame's every ambition, buying him a Mustang, designer clothes and jewelry, and even covering legal fees after a BB gun arrest in his teens. As young QC, Kwame chased a rap career, performing at local clubs and posting music online, but success eluded him. Friends like Ayanna Anderson, a stylist at Nappy Heads, told the Chicago Sun-Times, she gave him everything he wanted. Yet, Kwame's dreams outpaced his reality, and his mother's wealth became a target. Just 1 week after Yolanda's death on September 2, 2012, Kwame began draining her bank accounts. As the sole beneficiary of her $90,000 savings and 2 life insurance policies, he withdrew large sums. His spending was extravagant and brazen. He customized his Mustang with gull-wing doors, bought Air Jordans, gold chains, and $1,500 puppies, and splurged on designer outfits. In a YouTube video that later haunted the case, Kwame stood in a parking lot, tossing stacks of cash to a crowd, boasting, "I don't play no games, man. I do this for real." The video showed him reveling in his newfound wealth while Yolanda's family grieved. Eugene Spencer, 22 at the time of his arrest, lived on South Rockwell Street in Chicago's South Side. Public records offer little about his early life, but he was a known associate of Kwame's, connected through neighborhood ties. Prosecutors later revealed that Kwame hired Spencer for $3,500 to execute the crime, though Spencer claimed he received only $70. Spencer's role was direct. He entered Yolanda's apartment, armed with a gun, and carried out the fatal act, shooting and stabbing her, while Curtis Wyatt, Yolanda's boyfriend, fought to intervene. Loriana Johnson, 23, resided on East 131st Place, and was Kwame's former girlfriend. Her role was logistical, but crucial. She drove Spencer to and from Yolanda's apartment on September 2, 2012, acting as the getaway driver. Johnson later claimed she believed the plan was a robbery, not a murder, a defense her family supported. Johnson's relationship with Kwame, which lasted over a year, drew her into the plot, complicating her culpability. The interrogations, conducted in late December 2013, were intense and revealing. Kwame, questioned by Detective Michelle Wood, initially deflected blame. He admitted to planning a robbery for financial gain, saying it was supposed to be a robbery, but insisted he never intended Yolanda's death. When pressed about the second phone registered to Yolanda, he confirmed it was his, a gift from his mother. Wood's frustration was palpable. She asked, "What's wrong with you? Seriously, what's wrong with you?" Kwame pointed fingers at Spencer, claiming he acted alone, but phone records contradicted his story, showing calls to Spencer before and after the crime. Kwame had spoken to his mother about 40 minutes earlier and told her that he was coming over. Yolanda was waiting for her son to arrive. The door to the apartment was unlocked, so there were no signs of forced entry. The real mastermind was Kwame Wilson. Investigators determined that in addition to supplying Spencer with the gun, he had given him clothes and detergent to make it look like he lived in the building. Eugene Spencer's interrogation was a turning point. Initially, he claimed he was set up, describing a struggle at Yolanda's door and hearing gunshots. After hours of questioning, he confessed to entering the apartment, shooting Yolanda in the head at close range and stabbing her twice. He said Kwame called during the act, instructing, "Make sure that bitch is dead." Spencer admitted feeling pressured, believing Kwame had manipulated him, but his confession tied him directly to the crime scene. Loriana Johnson was less forthcoming. She maintained she thought the plan was a robbery, a claim her attorney later emphasized. Johnson's statements focused on her role as the driver, admitting she drove Spencer to Uptown but denying knowledge of the full plan. Her cooperation, though limited, helped prosecutors map the conspiracy, as phone records showed her communicating with Kwame and Spencer around the crime's timeline. The motive, as prosecutors laid out, was chillingly simple: greed. Kwame, desperate to fund his rap career, targeted Yolanda's $90,000 savings, life insurance policies, and salon business. The arrests of Kwame Wilson, Eugene Spencer, and Loriana Johnson in December 2013 marked a turning point in the investigation into Yolanda Holmes's death. But for her family, the pain was far from over. Let's walk through the courtroom battles, the arguments, the verdicts, and the lasting impact on those who cherished Yolanda, along with the latest updates on this heartbreaking case. The legal process began in earnest after the arrests, but it was a slow grind. The Cook County court system, known for its meticulous handling of high-profile cases, set the stage for a complex legal battle. By early 2015, Johnson's case diverged from the others. She pleaded guilty to armed robbery, a lesser charge, acknowledging her role in driving Spencer, but maintaining she believed the plan was a robbery, not a murder. On February 27, 2015, she was sentenced to 14 years, with credit for time served. The trials for Kwame and Spencer, however, were more protracted. Both were held without bail, their hearings delayed by the complexity of the evidence: phone records, surveillance footage, confessions, and witness testimony. By March 2019, nearly 7 years after Yolanda's death, their cases went to trial at the George Layton Criminal Courthouse. The two men were tried simultaneously, but before separate juries, a strategy to ensure fairness given their differing roles. Cook County Judge Stanley Sachs presided, and the courtroom was packed with Yolanda's family, including her sister Eunice Holmes and Aunt Sandra Jackson, who sat behind prosecutors each day. The trial, lasting a week, was an emotional ordeal, with evidence laying bare the depths of Kwame's betrayal. Prosecutors, led by Assistant State's Attorney Maura White, built a meticulous case rooted in digital and physical evidence. Phone records showed Kwame communicating with Spencer and Johnson before, during, and after the crime, including a call where he instructed Spencer to "make sure that bitch is dead." Surveillance footage captured Spencer entering Yolanda's building at 4:32 a.m. on September 2, 2012, using an access code Kwame provided. Curtis Wyatt, Yolanda's boyfriend, testified that he fought Spencer, who shot and stabbed Yolanda before fleeing. The prosecution played Kwame's YouTube video, showing him throwing cash to a crowd to illustrate his reckless spending of Yolanda's money. They highlighted Spencer's confession, where he admitted shooting Yolanda in the head and stabbing her twice after Kwame's call. Johnson's guilty plea and statements corroborated the conspiracy, though she wasn't called as a witness. The broken gun, knife, and earpiece from the crime scene, combined with the phone's digital footprint, formed an ironclad narrative. Prosecutors emphasized the personal nature of the crime, calling it matricide, the murder of one's own mother. Whatever he wanted, his mother gave to him: a car, a job. One could say he was spoiled, Judge Sachs later said. Kwame's defense, led by attorney Stephen Richards, argued that the police had coerced his confession and fed him details. They claimed Kwame believed the plan was a robbery, not a murder, echoing his interrogation statement. It was supposed to be a robbery. The defense pointed to inconsistencies in Spencer's account, suggesting he acted independently. They also challenged the reliability of phone records, arguing the calls didn't prove intent to kill. Kwame's team tried to humanize him, noting his youth and lack of prior violent history, but the YouTube video and his lavish spending undermined their efforts. Spencer's defense took a different tack, attempting to shift blame to Curtis Wyatt. They argued Wyatt, who fought Spencer, could have been involved, citing his failed polygraph test from 2012. Spencer's initial confession, that he struggled with another man and only heard gunshots, was played to sow doubt. His attorney, Michaela, claimed Spencer was manipulated by Kwame and feared being set up. As Spencer stated in his interrogation, "I felt like I was being set up." The defense challenged the earpiece's DNA, noting it remained unmatched, and questioned Wyatt's identification, suggesting trauma clouded his memory. Despite these efforts, the physical evidence and Spencer's later admission of shooting and stabbing Yolanda were hard to dismiss. On March 5, 2019, Kwame's jury deliberated for just over 2 hours before convicting him of first-degree murder, attempted murder of Curtis Wyatt, and home invasion. Spencer's jury took nearly 12 hours over 2 days, returning guilty verdicts on the same charges on March 6. The swift verdicts reflected the strength of the prosecution's case. Yolanda's family, seated in the front row, wept as the forewoman read the counts against Spencer, their grief tempered by relief. Sentencing came on January 31, 2020. Judge Sachs, addressing both men, condemned the crime's brutality. Kwame was sentenced to 99 years, 45 years for murder, 25 years for attempted murder, and 29 years for home invasion, to be served consecutively. Spencer received 100 years, 45 years for murder, 25 years for attempted murder, and 30 years for home invasion. The sentences were effectively life terms, with Spencer's parole date set for March 22, 2080, per Illinois Department of Corrections records. Loriana Johnson, having pleaded guilty in 2015, was released on parole in 2020 after serving 7 years. When asked if he had anything to say, Kwame, with Yolanda's name tattooed on his shoulder, said, "I just want to say, nobody loved my mother more than me," a statement met with skepticism by the court. The trial and verdicts brought closure, but deepened the family's wounds. Sandra Jackson, Yolanda's aunt, told the Chicago Sun-Times, "After all this, we still don't understand why he did it." As of May 2025, no significant developments have emerged since the 2020 sentencings. Kwame Wilson and Eugene Spencer remain incarcerated at Menard Correctional Center in Chester, Illinois, serving their 99 and 100-year sentences, respectively, per Illinois Department of Corrections records. A 2023 Illinois appellate court decision upheld Spencer's convictions, rejecting claims of ineffective counsel and unconstitutional sentencing. No appeals or parole hearings for Kwame have been reported, and given their sentences, both men are likely to spend their lives in prison. Yolanda Holmes's story is a stark reminder that greed can corrupt even the closest bonds. Her life, filled with generosity and community spirit, was stolen by those she trusted most, leaving a void in Chicago's uptown. The trials delivered justice, but they couldn't heal the scars left on her family. As we close this true crime chapter, one question lingers. What drives someone to betray the person who gave them everything? Thank you for joining us on this journey through one of Chicago's most heartbreaking cases. If this story gripped you, hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and join our community of true crime fans. Share your thoughts in the comments. Did the verdicts bring justice for Yolanda? Check out our other videos for more stories that unravel the human side of crime. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and keep chasing the truth with Checkered Sky. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Checkered Sky channel where we dive into true crime stories. Today we're diving into a chilling tale from the streets of Australia, a story of two young women, two separate tragedies, and a haunting thread that ties them together. In the bustling heart of Sydney, where skyscrapers gleam and nightlife hums, two lives were cut short in ways that shocked the nation. Michaela Dunn was just 24 years old when her life ended in a brutal incident in August 2019. Across town, a few years earlier in 2016, Dasha Volnoukhin, only 22, faced a harrowing ordeal that left scars, both seen and unseen. These weren't just isolated events. They carried eerie similarities that made investigators pause. Both occurred in the inner city, in places where people felt safe, where the pulse of urban life seemed to promise security. Yet, something sinister lurked beneath the surface. Let's set the stage. On August 13, 2019, in a high-rise apartment in Sydney's Clarence Street, police received a call that would unravel a tragedy. Emergency responders rushed to the scene, finding a chaotic aftermath in a modern building that housed professionals and students. Neighbors reported hearing raised voices, maybe a struggle, but no one could pinpoint exactly what had happened. Rewind to May 27, 2016, in Parramatta, a vibrant suburb west of Sydney's central business district. Dasha Volnoukhin, a young woman with dreams and ambition, found herself in a nightmare. In the Fiore Apartments, a modern complex much like the one in Michaela's story, an encounter turned terrifying. CCTV footage captured fleeting moments before the incident. Two figures in a lobby, an elevator ride, then silence. The question lingered. What connected these two cases across time? Both women were young, in their early 20s, living in Sydney's urban sprawl. Both incidents unfolded in apartments, places meant to be safe havens, and both left communities reeling, searching for answers. Were these random acts, or was there a pattern? The police began digging, piecing together timelines, interviewing friends, family, anyone who might know something. To understand the weight of these events, we need to know who they were, not just as names in headlines, but as daughters, friends, and dreamers with lives full of promise. Let's start with Michaela, then Dasha, and uncover the paths that brought them to that fateful crossroads. Michaela Dunn was born and raised in Sydney's inner west. She grew up in a close-knit community, attending Rosebank College in Five Dock. Her principal, Tom Galea, remembered her as a well-respected, conscientious, and highly motivated student, one of 4 social justice captains in her graduating year. Michaela wasn't just a leader, she was a role model, earning academic merit awards and leaving a lasting impression on her teachers and peers. Michaela had a sister, Emily, and a mother, Joanne, who called her a beautiful, loving woman who had studied at university and traveled widely. After high school, Michaela enrolled at the University of Notre Dame's Broadway campus in Sydney, earning a business qualification by 2016. Her social media painted a picture of a young woman embracing life, trips to the USA, Europe, Fiji, and Sri Lanka, including a star-studded visit to Coachella in California just months before her life ended in 2019. She posed at Park Güell in Barcelona, laughed with friends on nights out, and shared moments with her beloved cat. But there was another side to Michaela's life, one she kept private. By July 2016, she had registered as a sole trader and was working as an elite escort. This work funded her adventurous lifestyle, with rates for high-end escorts ranging from $500 an hour to over $5,000 for an overnight stay. It's unclear if her family knew about this part of her life. Friends like Joan, who mourned her loss, focused on her warmth and spirit, suggesting Michaela kept her professional choices discreet, perhaps to shield her loved ones or maintain her privacy in a world quick to judge. Now, let's turn to Dasha Volnoukhin, a 22-year-old whose journey to Australia began far from Sydney's shores. Born in 1997, Dasha hailed from Canada, where she studied business and corporate communications at the University of Calgary. Her LinkedIn profile revealed a young woman with ambition, having worked as a hostess and server in hospitality before chasing adventure abroad. In September 2015, Dasha arrived in Australia, drawn to its vibrant culture and opportunities. She settled on the Gold Coast initially, later moving to Sydney, where she took on various roles: topless waitress for pin-up promotions, occasional lingerie model, and MC for Wicked Club Crawl. Dasha's modeling agency described her as a special girl who had the world ahead of her, a sentiment echoed by friends who admired her drive and warmth. She loved animals, once saying she'd distribute all the stray and shelter puppies to living homes if she could. Like Michaela, Dasha entered the escort industry, signing a 1-month contract with Platinum Escorts, also known as Elite Escorts, in Sydney. It was a decision she kept hidden, even from close friends. Catherine Dudley, a former housemate, was stunned to learn of Dasha's work after her death, saying, "I don't think you can ever really know what else people have going on when they haven't told you everything." Dasha's move into escorting was recent. Her tragic encounter occurred on just her second night with the agency in May 2016. There's no evidence her family in Canada was aware of this work. Both Michaela and Dasha were young women carving their own paths. Michaela, the Sydney local with a knack for academics and a love for travel, and Dasha, the Canadian adventurer chasing dreams in a new country. Their choices to work as escorts weren't the sum of who they were, but they were part of their stories, choices that came with risks they couldn't have fully anticipated. Why did they choose this path? Maybe it was the financial freedom, the flexibility, or the chance to live life on their terms. But those choices led them to moments that would change everything. Next, we'll explore the days leading up to these incidents, searching for clues to what went wrong. Let's start with Michaela's story, then move to Dasha's, and uncover the chilling events that unfolded. It was a warm Tuesday afternoon, August 13th, 2019, in Sydney's Central Business District, a place where office workers hustled through lunch breaks and tourists snapped photos of the city's iconic skyline. At 33 Clarence Street, a sleek high-rise apartment building stood as a hub for young professionals and students. Michaela Dunn, 24, was in her apartment, a space she used for her work as an escort. She had arranged a meeting with a client who had agreed to pay $250 for what was advertised as a girlfriend experience, a service that promised companionship and intimacy. The client arrived around mid-afternoon, entering the building through its secure lobby. Inside the apartment, the encounter began like any other booking. But within minutes, the situation turned catastrophic. The client, a young man, became aggressive. In the front room of Michaela's apartment, a struggle ensued. Michaela fought back, her forearms and hands later showing defensive wounds, a testament to her desperate attempt to protect herself. The attack was swift and brutal, centered around a deep wound to her neck that ended her life. The assailant, bloodied and chaotic, didn't linger long. He placed one of the weapons, a knife, on the kitchen bench, a chilling detail that spoke to his detachment. He then fled, descending the building's fire stairs, dropping another bloodied knife as he went. The scene he left behind was one of tragedy. Michaela, lifeless in her own home, a place meant to be her sanctuary. Neighbors in the building later spoke of hearing raised voices or a commotion, but none had a clear picture of what had transpired. Now, let's travel back to May 27, 2016, to the Fiore Apartments in Parramatta, a lively suburb west of Sydney's CBD. The complex, with its modern facade and secure entry, was home to young professionals and newcomers like Dasha Volnoukhin, the 22-year-old Canadian who had arrived in Australia less than a year earlier. It was Dasha's second night working as an escort for Platinum Escorts, also known as Elite Escorts, under a 1-month contract she had signed to earn extra income. That evening, she had arranged to meet a client at her apartment in the Fiore complex. CCTV footage captured the client entering the building with Dasha, the two walking through the lobby and stepping into an elevator. To anyone watching, it looked like a routine interaction, nothing out of the ordinary for a Friday night in a busy urban hub. But once inside the apartment, the encounter took a terrifying turn. Moments after Dasha let the client in, he moved to the kitchen, pulling a large butcher-style knife from a drawer. Dasha, wearing shorts and a tank top, froze as he brandished the weapon. "Don't f***ing scream!" he shouted, his voice sharp with menace, before ordering her to take off her clothes. Dasha later told police she complied out of fear, believing that resistance could cost her life. "I was thinking that if I don't, I will probably die," she said in her statement. The client, aggressive and dominant, subjected her to a brief but harrowing assault lasting 3 to 4 minutes. During the ordeal, he held a mobile phone, recording the attack and demanding Dasha say degrading things, taunting her with phrases like, "Do you like this?" and "Say you're a s***." When it was over, he stole her day's earnings and fled, leaving Dasha shaken but alive. Unlike Michaela's story, Dasha's encounter didn't end in immediate tragedy, but the scars it left were deep. She reported the incident to the police, providing a detailed statement that described the client's actions, his large neck tattoo, and the chilling way he seemed to revel in her fear. The Fiore apartments, like Michaela's building, became a focal point for investigators, its modern exterior hiding the terror that had unfolded within. Dasha's life continued, but the weight of that night followed her, a shadow that would resurface in the months and years that followed. These two moments, August 13th, 2019, for Michaela, and May 27th, 2016, for Dasha, were separated by years but bound by a haunting similarity. Both took place in apartments, spaces meant to be safe, in the heart of Sydney's urban landscape. Both involved young women working as escorts, meeting clients who turned those private encounters into nightmares. The details paint a picture of vulnerability, not because of who Michaela and Dasha were, but because of the risks inherent in their work, risks that no one should have to face. Now, the police were racing against time to find the culprits. Who were these men, and what drove them to commit such acts? Let's dive into the hunt for answers, starting with Michaela's case, then Dasha's, as the net tightened around those responsible. The investigation into Michaela Dunn's death on August 13, 2019, began the moment police arrived at her Clarence Street apartment. The scene was chaotic. Her body discovered with a fatal neck wound, the apartment sealed off as forensic teams scoured for evidence. CCTV footage was their first lead, showing a young man entering the building around 1:30 p.m. and leaving just 20 minutes later at 1:50 p.m., his clothes stained with blood. This man, later identified as Mert Ney, 20, from Marayong in Sydney's west, didn't stay hidden for long. After fleeing down the fire stairs, he burst onto Clarence Street, brandishing a 20-centimeter kitchen knife and shouting phrases that sent pedestrians scattering in fear. Witnesses were crucial. Hundreds saw the chaos unfold between Clarence and Wynyard Streets. Office workers, shoppers, and passers-by described a bloodied man running wildly, waving a knife. One bystander, lawyer John Bamford, had been heading to lunch when he spotted Ney in blood-soaked clothes. "I set off after him with the chair because it was the only available thing I could get hold of to sort him out with," Bamford told 7 News, recounting how he grabbed a cafe chair to confront Ney. Others joined in, businessmen with milk crates, firefighters wielding axes from their truck, These highest order of heroes, as Police Commissioner Mick Fuller called them, pinned Ney to the ground near Wynyard Lane, detaining him until police arrived around 2 p.m. Police found a USB on Ney with footage of violent attacks from New Zealand and the US, raising questions about his mindset, though no terrorist links were confirmed. Ney's family provided critical context. His sister, speaking near their Mariong home, expressed horror and shame. "Mostly I just want to say sorry to the victims," she told the Daily Mail. She described Ney as troubled, with a history of mental health issues, noting he had absconded from an ambulance after a drug overdose days earlier. Police searched a Blacktown property where Ney had been staying, uncovering no clear motive but confirming he lacked the funds for Michaela's services, suggesting he may have brought the knife with intent. His arrest was swift, but the investigation continued, with detectives probing his mental state and possible premeditation. The investigation into Dasha Volnoukhin's assault on May 27, 2016, took a different path, but was no less urgent. Dasha's courage in reporting the incident immediately gave police a head start. She provided a detailed statement describing a man with a large neck tattoo who had pulled a butcher knife from her kitchen drawer, threatened her, and recorded the assault. Her description of the attacker's appearance and behavior, aggressive, dominant, and chillingly deliberate, was a vital lead. CCTV from the Fiore apartments showed the man entering with Dasha and leaving shortly after, his demeanor calm but purposeful. Police canvassed the Parramatta neighborhood, but few neighbors reported anything suspicious. The Fiore apartments, like Michaela's building, were secure, with residents often unaware of others' activities. No one reported seeing the suspect loitering beforehand, but police cross-referenced Dasha's description with other recent crimes. The breakthrough came the next day, May 28, 2016, when a car chase in Bondi led to the arrest of Mustafa Kayarici, 28, after a struggle with armed officers. His distinctive neck tattoo matched Dasha's account, and police linked him to a string of similar assaults across Sydney. Investigators learned Kayarici had been on a 6-week rampage, targeting escorts and others. On May 7, 2016, he had attacked another woman in Sydney's CBD, and later that day, another in Parramatta, both with a knife. Witnesses from those incidents described a similar pattern: a man posing as a client, turning violent once inside. Police interviewed victims and colleagues from Platinum Escorts, where Dasha had worked her second night. The agency confirmed her brief tenure, but had no prior complaints about Kayarici. His arrest in Bondi, after attempting to evade police, closed the net on a predator who had terrorized multiple women. The investigations into Michaela and Dasha's cases revealed stark realities. For Michaela, a spontaneous act of public bravery led to Ney's arrest, but left lingering questions about his motives. For Dasha, her own detailed account pointed police to Kayarici, a serial offender whose pattern emerged only after her courage. Yet, the question remained: who were these men? What drove them to commit such acts? In this chapter, we'll uncover their backgrounds, their words after arrest, the charges they faced, and the chilling motives, or lack thereof, behind their crimes. Let's start with Mert Ney, then turn to Mustafa Kayarici as we peel back the layers of these dark figures. Mert Ney was 20 years old when he walked into Michaela Dunn's Clarence Street apartment on August 13, 2019. Born in 1998 in Mariong, a suburb in Sydney's west, Ney grew up in a Turkish Cypriot family. Little is known about his early childhood, but by high school in Blacktown, he was described as quiet, almost withdrawn. He didn't speak much, a classmate later told police, though no one pegged him as dangerous at the time. As a teenager, Ney began exploring extremist ideologies, specifically Salafi Islam, storing related material on a USB stick found during the investigation. This raised red flags, but police found no concrete ties to organized terrorism. His life unraveled further in the years leading up to 2019. Unemployed and living in crisis housing in Blacktown, Ney struggled with mental health issues and drug use. He had recorded a 10-second video of himself standing over Michaela's body, sending it to a friend on Facebook with the message, "I'm f***ing psycho. I was laughing, bro." The fear. During interrogations, Ney offered little clarity on his motives, though his lawyer, Zemarai Katiz, told the Parramatta bail court he intended to defend the charges on mental health grounds, citing untreated mental illness and a lack of pain medication post-arrest. The charges against Ney were severe: murder for Michaela's death, attempted murder for stabbing Lynn Bowe, 41, in the shoulder during his CBD rampage, and other related offenses like wounding with intent. No prior criminal history was publicly detailed, suggesting Michaela's attack was his first major offense, though his drug use and extremist interests hinted at a troubled path. Yet, no personal connection to Michaela or clear ideological drive was established, leaving his motive shrouded in a mix of mental instability and personal chaos. Mustafa Kayarici, the man behind Dasha Volnoukhin's assault, was a different kind of predator. Born around 1988, Kayarici was 28 at the time of his 2016 crime spree. Little is known about his early life, but by 2016, he was a heavy user of methamphetamine, or ice, a detail that emerged during his trial. His distinctive neck tattoo became a key identifier, noted by Dasha in her police statement. Kayarici had no public profile before his crimes, but his actions revealed a calculated and sadistic pattern. He targeted escorts and vulnerable women across Sydney, striking repeatedly over 6 weeks from May to June 2016. His attacks began on May 7th, when he assaulted an escort in Sydney's CBD with a butcher knife, followed by another attack that afternoon in Parramatta. On May 20th, he robbed another escort at knife point, and on June 19th, he assaulted yet another, calling her a little dog. Among his victims was also an underage girl. In court, Kayarici claimed innocence, insisting he recorded his encounters to prove consent, saying, "The point is, I've got it all on footage. I know I'm innocent." But the footage, described as highly inculpatory by Sergeant Bragger, showed no consent, only fear. Dasha's statement detailed his chilling demands, like asking, "Do you like being raped?" while filming, and telling another victim he loved seeing the fear in people when they can't do anything about it. These statements revealed a man who thrived on control and terror. Kayarici was charged with 42 counts. His motive, as described by victims, seemed rooted in sadistic pleasure and power. One victim told police he was aggressive and dominant, spitting in her eye and reveling in her fear. His ice addiction likely fueled his recklessness, but his methodical targeting of escorts suggested planning, not impulse. Mert Ney and Mustafa Kayarici, two men, two paths to destruction. Ney, a troubled young man with no clear motive beyond chaos, and Kayarici, a serial predator driven by control and cruelty. Their words after arrest, Ney's gloating, Kayarici's denial, offer glimpses into their minds, but no justification for their actions. The charges they faced were only the beginning of justice for Michaela, Dasha, and others. Next, we'll step into the courtroom to see how their fates were decided. What did the prosecution and defense argue? What verdicts were reached, and what did they mean for the families left behind? We'll also confront the heartbreaking reality of Dasha's death and explore the latest twists in Mert Ney's story, including his continued defiance behind bars. Let's start with Mustafa Kayarici's trial, then turn to Mert Ney's as we unravel the final chapter of this terrible tale. Mustafa Kayarici's trial unfolded at Sydney's Downing Centre District Court, a sprawling legal battle that spanned 2019 and 2020, addressing his 6-week crime spree in 2016. Prosecutors leaned heavily on victim statements, including Dasha Volnoukhin's, which detailed his chilling demands, filming assaults while taunting victims with phrases like, "Do you like being raped?" The prosecution highlighted the consistency of his methods, posing as a client, pulling a knife, and recording to feign consent. The defense, represented by Kayarichi's legal team, argued that his ice addiction impaired his judgment, portraying him as a man spiraling out of control rather than a deliberate monster. They claimed the recordings were meant to prove consent, not to degrade, though this was swiftly dismantled by the prosecution's evidence showing victims' fear. The defense also attempted to question the reliability of victim identifications, particularly the neck tattoo, but CCTV footage from the Fiore apartments and other locations corroborated Dasha's and others' accounts. In early 2019, the jury found Kayarichi guilty on all 42 charges, a verdict that brought a measure of relief to the victims' families, though it came too late for Dasha. Dasha Volnoukhin died on May 13, 2018, on the Gold Coast, Queensland, just months before Kayarichi's sentencing. For legal reasons, the cause of her death has not been disclosed, although some sources suggest that she suffered from depression following an attack on her in 2016. Our community lost a friend, sister, partner, and amazing young woman, a friend wrote online, capturing the profound loss felt by those who knew her. The jury was not informed of her death during the trial to avoid bias, but its revelation after a suppression order was lifted in December 2019 amplified the tragedy for her loved ones. Her modeling agency, Pinup Promotions, mourned, saying, "Words cannot express the shock and loss felt from all those who knew her well and those who knew her only briefly." Kayarichi's sentencing came in two parts. In 2019, he received 28 years for the assaults on 5 women, including Dasha, with a non-parole period ensuring he'd serve at least 21 years. On August 28, 2020, Judge Michael King sentenced him to an additional 34 years for the 5-hour assault on a 13-year-old girl, with the terms partly cumulative, making him eligible for release in 2066 at age 76. However, Kayarichi never served the full term. Diagnosed with terminal brain cancer in 2021, he died in prison on January 25, 2022, at Prince of Wales Hospital in Sydney. For Dasha's friends, his death was bittersweet. Mert Ney's trial, also at the Downing Centre District Court, began after his arrest on August 13, 2019, for Michaela Dunn's murder and the subsequent CBD rampage. The prosecution, led by experienced Crown prosecutors, argued that Ney's actions were premeditated and deliberate. They pointed to the knife in his backpack, his lack of funds for Michaela's services, and his chilling behavior post-attack, filming a 10-second video and texting a friend, "I'm psycho. I was laughing, bro." Justice Peter Johnson presiding noted, "I have reason to think that he traveled to the city with the intention of committing physical damage," citing the knife as evidence of intent. The defense, led by Zemarai Katiz, leaned heavily on Ney's mental health struggles, arguing he was not fully responsible due to untreated mental illness and drug use. In court, Ney's subdued demeanor contrasted with his earlier bravado, and his lawyers sought a mental health defense, arguing diminished capacity. However, the prosecution countered with evidence of Ney's lucidity during the attack, including his coherent messages and flight from the scene, undermining claims of a psychotic break. In December 2020, Ney pleaded guilty to Michaela's murder and related charges. On June 9, 2021, Justice Johnson sentenced him to 44 years in prison, with a non-parole period of 33 years, meaning he won't be eligible for release until 2052, when he'll be 53. The judge described the murder as a violent, terrifying, and chaotic rampage, noting its profound impact on Michaela's family. The verdict brought some closure, but the pain of Michaela's absence remained raw for her loved ones, who faced a life without her vibrant spirit. Nay's story didn't end with sentencing. While incarcerated at Long Bay Correctional Complex, he continued his violent behavior. In August 2024, Nay attacked a prison guard, an incident reported by the Daily Telegraph. The assault occurred during a routine interaction, with Nay allegedly lashing out, causing minor injuries to the guard. Details are sparse, as prison incidents often receive limited public disclosure, but the attack led to additional charges of assault, occasioning actual bodily harm. In a brief court appearance via video link in early 2025, Nay pleaded guilty to the assault, with Magistrate Susan Horan presiding at Downing Center Local Court. On March 10, 2025, he received an additional 18-month sentence to be served concurrently with his existing term, meaning it didn't extend his 2052 release date. The prosecution argued the attack showed Nay's ongoing danger, while his defense cited the harsh conditions of solitary confinement as a factor in his behavior, though the court prioritized prison safety. The courtrooms delivered verdicts, but justice is never simple. For Dasha's loved ones, Kayarichi's death in prison closed a chapter, but her absence and the mystery of her final days left questions unanswered. For Michaela's family, Nay's long sentence was a step toward accountability, yet his continued violence behind bars offered little peace. These cases remind us of the fragility of safety, the courage of those who speak out, and the enduring pain of loss. What does justice mean when lives are shattered? That's the question we're left with. Thank you for joining me on this journey through a story that's as heartbreaking as it is gripping. If this moved you, hit that subscribe button for Checkered Sky and ring the bell so you don't miss our next true crime tale. Share your thoughts in the comments. What struck you most about Michaela and Dasha's stories? Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Checkered Sky channel where we dive into true crime stories. Today we're diving into a heartbreaking case that shook a quiet town in the UK to its core. This is a story about trust, betrayal, and a devastating event that left a family forever changed.
It's truly horrific and heartbreaking. Police and ambulance were called to an address in Greyhound Lane, Norton, just after 8 AM this morning.
If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and join us as we unravel the chilling events that unfolded in Stourbridge, England. Let's get started. It was a crisp March morning in 2017, the kind where the air feels fresh and the world seems peaceful. Greyhound Lane, a leafy suburban street in Stourbridge, was waking up. Neighbors were starting their day, walking dogs, sipping coffee, heading to work. The Wilkinsons, a well-liked family, lived in a large, beautifully restored red brick home. Tracy Wilkinson, 50, was known for her warm smile and generous heart. She was a former ballroom dancing champion, a volunteer who loved helping others, and a devoted mother. Her husband, Peter, a successful businessman, was out that morning, taking their greyhound Mandy for a walk. The dog smelled a foreign odor, but at that moment, Peter paid no attention to Mandy's behavior. Their daughter, Lydia, was away at Bristol University, studying for her future. And their teenage son, Pierce, was still at home, likely getting ready for school at Redhill. But around 8 AM, that peaceful morning was shattered. Emergency services flooded Greyhound Lane, sirens piercing the calm. Police cars and ambulances lined the street. Something unthinkable had happened at the Wilkinson home. Inside, authorities found a scene of chaos. Tracy was discovered lifeless in her bedroom, her body on the floor. Pierce was found in his room, gravely injured, fighting to survive. In the garden, Peter was discovered, wounded but alive, clutching his phone after managing to call 999. The police began their investigation immediately, interviewing neighbors and combing through the family's life for clues. Peter, now in critical condition at Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham, was unable to provide much information at first, but he'd given the 999 operator a vital clue: the name of the person he believed was responsible and the registration of the stolen Land Rover. What made this case so chilling was the Wilkinsons' reputation. Tracy was known for her volunteer work, especially at a local addiction clinic, and her knack for making people feel at ease. Peter ran a successful business, and the family had spent years turning their Greyhound Lane home into a warm, inviting space. The police wondered, could this have been a targeted attack? Had someone from Tracy's volunteer work or Peter's business dealings crossed a line? Or was this a stranger who saw an opportunity in an unlocked door? As investigators dug deeper, they found CCTV footage from the Wilkinson home that showed a figure prowling the garden in the early hours, dressed in black, moving with purpose. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment act. It looked planned. The footage raised more questions than answers. Who was this person, and what drove them to target the Wilkinsons? The Wilkinson family was the kind of family you'd want as neighbors: kind, grounded, and always ready to lend a hand. Let's step into the lives of the Wilkinsons to understand who they were, what made them so special, and how a single act of compassion set the stage for what was to come. Tracy Wilkinson, at 50, was the heart of her family. A former Latin American ballroom dancing champion, she had a grace that carried into her everyday life. After raising her children, she poured her energy into volunteering, particularly at a local center for people struggling with addiction. Friends described her as someone who couldn't walk past someone in need without stopping to help. One friend recalled, "Tracy was the type to give a sandwich to a homeless person. She just wanted to make a difference." She was a full-time mom who cherished her family, often hosting dinners at their beautifully restored Victorian home, which she and Peter had spent years perfecting. Pierce, a Year 8 student at Red Hill School, was a bright spark in the community. Known for his infectious smile and love for computer games, he had a knack for making friends. His head teacher, Stephen Dunster, described him as loyal, caring, and conscientious. Pierce was devoted to the family's greyhound Mandy, often joining Peter on walks or playing with her in the garden. He was a typical teenager, fun-loving, a bit cheeky, but always kind. He was close to his older sister, Lydia, and the two shared a bond over their love for West Bromwich Albion, often attending matches with their parents. Peter, a successful businessman, ran a company manufacturing safety barriers, splitting his time between Stourbridge and Newport, South Wales. He was a dedicated father and husband, known for his quiet strength and generosity. He and Tracy had built a life centered around their children and community, often seen walking Mandy or chatting with neighbors at the local pub. Their daughter Lydia, 18 at the time, was thriving at Bristol University, studying biology. She was home just days before the tragedy for Mother's Day, surprising Tracy with a visit that she called the best ever. The family shared a Sunday roast, laughing and making memories, unaware of the shadow creeping closer. The Wilkinsons' compassion extended beyond their immediate circle. It was March 2016 when Tracy Wilkinson, out shopping at a Tesco in Stourbridge, noticed a young man huddled in a cardboard box, trying to stay warm in the spring chill. That man was Aaron Barley, 23 at the time, a figure who appeared vulnerable and in desperate need of help. Tracy, whose heart always went out to those struggling, couldn't walk away. She approached him, struck up a conversation, and learned he was homeless, with no family to turn to. Without hesitation, she drove him to Dudley Council to secure a place in a hostel, ensuring he had a roof over his head for a few days. This wasn't just a one-off act of charity. Tracy made it her mission to check in on him, organizing breakfast and dinner, sometimes inviting him to the family's Greyhound Lane home for meals. Her compassion set the tone for the Wilkinsons' relationship with Barley, one rooted in a desire to give him a chance at a better life. Peter Wilkinson saw potential in Barley. In April 2016, he offered him a job as a laborer, hoping steady work would help him rebuild. Barley started strong, washing, loading, and unloading crash barriers in a busy yard. Colleagues noted he was a hard worker at first, blending in with the team. The Wilkinsons went further, paying for a mobile phone contract to keep him connected, and even covering costs for temporary accommodation when needed. For a time, it seemed like their efforts were paying off. Barley was grateful, often expressing his thanks, and the family began to see him as someone they could help turn around. He joined them for meals, and by Christmas 2016, he was invited to their home for dinner, a gesture that spoke to their trust in him. In a handwritten card, he addressed Tracy as the mother I never had, a sentiment that tugged at her heartstrings and deepened her commitment to supporting him. But who was Aaron Barley, and what shaped the man the Wilkinsons welcomed? His background was marked by hardship and instability. Born in 1993, Barley's early life was marred by tragedy and dysfunction. His parents died when he was young, his father from cancer when Barley was 6, and his mother from a heart attack 2 years later, leaving him orphaned by age 8. Raised in a series of children's homes and foster care, he faced challenges that left deep scars. His foster carer from 2003 to 2007, Eileen Adams, described him as a Jekyll and Hyde character, capable of being loving and sensitive one moment, but unpredictable and volatile the next. At Hunters Hill Technology College in Bromsgrove, Worcestershire, peers remembered him as popular, but cocky, with a tendency to act out. By 12, he was already writing lists of people he wanted to harm, a disturbing sign of the anger simmering beneath his surface. At 18, he served a 3-year sentence for attacking an ex-girlfriend with a piece of wood, revealing a history of aggression. He was also a teenage parent, though little is known about his relationship with his child. Barley's troubled past followed him into his relationship with the Wilkinsons. By September 2016, cracks began to show. At Peter's company, Barley's behavior shifted. He started using illegal substances, which affected his work. Peter had no choice but to let him go, though the parting was amicable. Barley falsely claimed his mother had died to explain his spiral, a lie that raised red flags but didn't deter the Wilkinsons' compassion. In late October or early November, Peter found Barley asleep on their driveway, covered in bruises, possibly from a fight. Tracy, unwilling to see him back on the streets, arranged for him to stay with the family for 2 weeks while they sorted out council accommodation. During this time, Barley did odd jobs for the family and their relatives, earning pocket money for food and cigarettes. He seemed grateful, but there were hints of unease. Tracy, who volunteered at Atlantic House Recovery Center in Dudley, noticed Barley's behavior growing erratic. She confided in a volunteer that he'd made a threatening comment, though she didn't report it to the police or the center's managers, perhaps hoping it was a one-off. The Wilkinsons' relationship with Barley was complex, shaped by their kindness and his unpredictability. With Tracy, he was deferential, almost reverent, leaning into her maternal warmth. He relied on her for meals and emotional support, and his Christmas card suggested a deep attachment, though whether it was genuine or manipulative remains unclear. With Pierce, Barley was friendly but distant. Pierce, a typical 13-year-old focused on school and gaming, didn't seem to have a deep bond with him, but there's no record of conflict. Peter treated Barley with a mix of generosity and caution, offering him work and structure, but keeping an eye on his behavior, especially after the drug use surfaced. Lydia, who was 19 and away at Bristol University, had limited contact with Barley. She saw him during visits home, like Christmas, but their interactions were minimal. The family's efforts were tireless. Meals, a job, accommodation, even small gestures like paying for his phone. But Barley's instability began to strain their goodwill. By February 2017, the relationship was fraying. Barley's visits to the Wilkinson home became less frequent, and he was living in a flat in Brierley Hill, near Stourbridge. His behavior grew more concerning. His foster carer reported violent Facebook posts to the police, including threats to take down his family and musings about a killing spree. West Midlands police investigated but didn't connect Barley to the Wilkinsons at the time. Around this time, Tracy noticed him staring over their fence, an unsettling act she shared with a friend. Days before the tragedy, the Wilkinsons canceled the mobile phone contract they'd been paying for, a decision that may have been the final straw for Barley. He'd told volunteers at Atlantic House he wanted to harm a police officer or prison officer, and his 21 prior convictions, including assault, painted a picture of a compulsive liar and manipulator. The Wilkinsons, unaware of the full extent of his past, still saw him as someone they could help. But Barley was no longer the grateful young man who'd shared Christmas dinner with the family. Instead, he was plotting, using his knowledge of their home, gained through their kindness, to plan something sinister. The CCTV footage from that night, showing him crawling through their garden in a balaclava, revealed a calculated intent. What drove him to betray the family that had given him so much? Let's dive into the day that changed Stourbridge forever. The morning of March 30th, 2017, began like any other on Greyhound Lane. Security footage from the Wilkinson home, later released by West Midlands Police, painted a chilling picture of Aaron Barley's movements. The night before, around 1 a.m., Barley had crept onto the property, dressed in dark clothing, his colorful sneakers covered with black socks to avoid detection. He tried to break into the house through a window, but found it locked. Undeterred, he hid in the garden shed, waiting for the perfect moment. At 6:30 a.m., as the first light of dawn broke, Barley emerged from the shed, moving like a predator. The footage showed him crawling on his hands and knees, staying low to avoid triggering motion sensors or being seen by neighbors. He was acting like a ninja, as Peter later described to the court. At around 7 a.m., Peter left to walk Mandy, leaving the back door unlocked, a common habit in their safe suburban neighborhood. This was the opportunity Barley had been waiting for. The CCTV footage captured him rising from his hiding spot behind a bush, moving swiftly toward the house. He entered through the unlocked back door, armed with a kitchen knife. Inside, the house was silent. Tracy was upstairs, likely unaware of the danger. Pierce was in his room, possibly still asleep or preparing for the day. Barley moved with purpose, climbing the stairs to where the family felt safest. Around 7:30 a.m., Barley's plan unfolded with terrifying speed. He targeted Tracy first, attacking her in her bed. Pierce was next, in his own room, caught off guard. By the time Peter returned from walking Mandy, around 8 a.m., the house was no longer a home, but a crime scene. As he stepped into the garden, Barley was waiting, emerging with the same knife. Peter later told the Sun, "I returned home from walking the dog when Barley burst from a cupboard screaming, 'Just die, you.'" The attack was relentless, leaving Peter with severe injuries. Bleeding heavily, he collapsed in the garden, but his survival instinct kicked in. With fading strength, he managed to pull out his phone and dial 999, gasping out critical details: Barley's name and the registration of the family's Land Rover Discovery, which Barley had just stolen. Moments later, he blacked out, unaware if he'd survive. Meanwhile, Barley was fleeing in the stolen Land Rover, captured on dashcam footage weaving through traffic, driving on pavements, and cutting off cars. West Midlands police were already in pursuit, alerted by Peter's call. The chase ended when Barley, unable to control the vehicle, crashed into a wall near Dudley, leaving the knife inside. Officers swarmed the scene, apprehending him after a brief attempt to flee on foot. But why had he done this? Why did he betray the family that gave him so much? He was taken to a Birmingham police station, where the gravity of his actions began to unfold. Peter underwent life-saving surgery and spent 11 days in hospital, learning of Tracy and Pierce's deaths only after waking from a coma. Lydia, who rushed from Bristol University to identify her mother and brother at the mortuary, faced the prospect of planning a triple funeral alone, fearing her father wouldn't survive. The community left flowers and heartfelt notes outside the Wilkinson home, one reading, "To my mate Tracy, only the good die young. I can't believe your act of kindness ended this way." In custody, Barley's behavior was erratic and defiant. West Midlands police attempted to interview him, but he was largely uncooperative, refusing to provide samples for forensic analysis or a blood test to determine if drugs or alcohol played a role. Hours after his arrest, Barley's demeanor turned chillingly cavalier. He told a police officer, "I've stabbed 3 people up. I ain't bothered about taking one of you with me." A statement that revealed a lack of remorse. Later, at Winson Green Jail, he spoke to the deputy duty director, Michael Hazelgrove, saying, "I am pleased that I got 2, but I am upset that I didn't get him," referring to Peter Wilkinson. When asked to clarify, Barley added, "Well, there was 3 in the house, and 2 didn't walk out." These cold admissions painted a picture of a man who felt no regret for his actions. Barley's statements in custody were sparse but revealing. At one point, he reportedly said, "I had the knife in my hand. I chopped them up. I don't need a solicitor. I've done it. What's more to say?" This blunt confession confirmed his involvement, but offered no insight into why he targeted the Wilkinsons. His refusal to cooperate left police piecing together his mindset from other clues. Detective Chisholm emphasized, "He still has not assisted us to gain a clear understanding of what motivated him or what the reasons were behind this horrific attack. There is usually a buildup or a motive or a grudge of something, but this one is just very random." On April 1, 2017, Barley appeared at Birmingham Magistrates Court, charged with 2 counts of murder for the deaths of Tracy Wilkinson, 50, and her son Pierce, as well as 1 count of attempted murder of Peter Wilkinson. Wearing a green hospital-style gown and with his arm in a sling, he confirmed his name and lack of fixed address, hobbling as he left the courtroom. The charges reflected the brutality of the attack. Tracy was stabbed 17 times, Pierce 8 times, and Peter 6 times, though the court avoided graphic details to respect the family. The absence of a clear motive baffled both the police and the Wilkinsons. Peter, reflecting on the tragedy, offered his own theory to Sky News. "My personal feeling is that he'd lost his job. He lost his flat. And he decided that because his life was going bad ways, he was going to take it out on the people that had cared and looked after him." This theory was supported by events leading up to the attack: Barley's dismissal from Peter's company due to drug use, the loss of his flat in Brierley Hill, and the Wilkinsons' decision to cancel his mobile phone contract days before the attack. Barley's lack of explanation only deepened the family's pain, leaving them to grapple with a senseless act. The police, too, were left with more questions than answers, but the evidence, CCTV, the knife, Peter's 999 call, and Barley's own admissions, was overwhelming. What lay ahead was the sentencing, where the court would decide how to punish a man who had betrayed a family's trust in the most devastating way. The legal process moved swiftly after Barley's arrest. By October 3, 2017, what was meant to be the first day of his trial at Birmingham Crown Court took an unexpected turn. Barley, then 24, appeared in a blue t-shirt and spoke quietly as he entered guilty pleas to all charges. He had already pleaded guilty to the attempted murder charge in May, but his last-minute admission to the murder charges spared the Wilkinson family the ordeal of a full trial. The decision was a relief, but it also meant the courtroom would focus on sentencing, where the prosecution and defense would clash over the weight of Barley's crimes and the punishment he deserved. The impact on Peter and Lydia Wilkinson was profound, laid bare in their victim impact statements. Lydia, only 19 at the time, faced Barley in court with remarkable courage, saying, "My parents helped you. You repaid them with destruction and heartache. You have obliterated my life, murdered half my family, very nearly all of it. And for this, I will never forgive you." She described being haunted to my core, a shell of her former self, plagued by anxiety attacks and unable to be alone. Judge Carr praised her maturity and courage well beyond her years for delivering the statement. Peter, still bearing physical and emotional scars, spoke of a permanent void in his life, compounded by post-traumatic stress disorder and weekly counseling. The prosecution, led by Karim Khalil, painted a damning picture of Barley's actions. They argued that his attack was premeditated and vicious, exploiting the trust and intimate knowledge he gained from the Wilkinsons' kindness. Khalil highlighted the CCTV footage, which Judge Carr later called chilling, showing Barley crawling through the garden in a balaclava, dressed in black, and even covering his colorful sneakers with socks to avoid detection. The prosecution emphasized the betrayal. Barley was a compulsive liar and manipulator, Khalil told the court, noting his 21 prior convictions, including an assault on an ex-partner. They pointed to his planning, hiding in the garden shed overnight after failing to break in at 1 a.m., and his lack of remorse, evidenced by his callous statements in custody, like telling an officer, "I've stabbed 3 people up. I ain't bothered about taking one of you with me." The prosecution argued that Barley's attack was not just a crime, but a profound violation of the family's compassion, noting that less than a week before, the Wilkinsons had canceled a mobile phone contract they paid for, possibly triggering his resentment. They pushed for a severe sentence, reflecting the violent and sustained assault involving severe force. The defense, representing Barley, had little room to maneuver given his guilty pleas and the overwhelming evidence. They didn't dispute the facts, but focused on mitigating factors, particularly Barley's youth and troubled background. His parents died when he was young. The defense argued that this instability shaped his chaotic life. They also noted his 21 prior convictions, including a 3-year sentence for assaulting an ex-partner, to suggest a pattern of impulsivity rather than calculated malice. Psychiatric reports, reviewed in court, found no basis for diminished responsibility, ruling out mental health defenses, but the defense leaned on Barley's age, 24 at sentencing, to argue against a whole-life tariff, hoping for a chance at future parole. Their case was weak against the prosecution's evidence, and Barley's refusal to explain his motive or allow toxicology tests left the defense with little to counter the narrative of a deliberate, unrepentant act. On October 4, 2017, Judge Carr delivered the verdict, sentencing Barley to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 30 years, meaning he would not be eligible for parole until at least 2047, when he'd be in his 50s. She warned he may never be released, citing the very significant risk of serious harm he posed to the public. The judge rejected a whole-life tariff, principally because of your youth, but condemned Barley's actions as a vicious and unprovoked attack that abused the Wilkinsons' extraordinary kindness and generosity. She highlighted the terror Tracy and Pierce must have endured, noting, one of them, at least, must have been aware of the other's plight, and criticized Barley's lack of remorse, pointing to his regret that Peter survived. The sentence was later reviewed when Solicitor General Robert Buckland argued it was unduly lenient. He will now serve a minimum of 34 years and 178 days. The latest updates show the Wilkinsons struggle to move forward. By February 2018, Peter and Lydia put their Greyhound Lane home, Rathmore Lodge, on the market for £650,000, unable to live with the memories of that March morning. This case leaves us with a haunting question. How does a family's kindness become their undoing? The Wilkinson story is a stark reminder that trust, while beautiful, can carry unseen risks. What do you think drove Aaron Barley to such a betrayal? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's keep this conversation going. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button, tap the bell for notifications, and join the Checkered Sky community for more true crime stories that dig deep into the human heart. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay curious and stay safe.